It is fast moving.
It is a battle to the finish.
In an unprecedented political battlefield.
Democrats are motivated to the max.
House races that you should be watching.
Where every vote counts.
It is razor tight.
What he thinks are the hot button issues.
The suspense is gripping.
How will the balance of power fall out? And what's in store for the future of our country?
We are Americans, and our hearts bleed red, white, and blue.
Tonight, everything could change. And it all starts now.
You are looking live at Fox Square here in Midtown Manhattan, world headquarters of the Fox News Channel, and tonight, the center of the political universe. We are counting down to the first poll closings of the night and the first results of the 2018 midterms. From outside, right inside to Studio F, America's election headquarters and the nerve center of our election night coverage. Good evening. I'm Brett Baer.
And I'm Martha McCallum. The stakes tonight are very high, with the first polls set to close in less than an hour from now. Hanging in the balance, control of the House and the Senate, and possibly the future of the Trump presidency. Here's how the numbers break down. Let's first fly into the House side of the Congress. Republicans currently hold the majority with 240 seats. Democrats have 195. There are 7 vacancies. Democrats need a net gain of 23 seats in order to take over control of the House, meaning they need to hold on to all of their seats and pick up 23 more that are now held by Republicans. Anything short of that, and Republicans would keep control.
Now over to the Senate side of the U.S. Capitol, where the margin of error for Democrats is much tighter. Republicans have a slim majority of 51. Democrats have 49. 2 independents caucus with them. Democrats need to pick up 2 seats to take control, and those 2 seats could come down to just a few key toss-up races. At 7 p.m. Eastern, all eyes will be on Indiana, arguably one of the most competitive contests in the country. Incumbent Democrat Senator Joe Donnelly facing a tough race against Republican Mike Braun. President Trump won Indiana by 19 points in 2016, and he has campaigned heavily for Braun this year.
Arizona also extremely tight. No matter how it turns out, the Grand Canyon state will have its first ever female senator. Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally, a former fighter pilot, is in a dogfight now against Democrat Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. At 8 p.m., 3 big toss-up states close. First up will be Tennessee. Many analysts think the road to the Senate runs through the volunteer state. Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn and Democrat Phil Bredesen both looking to fill that open seat.
In Missouri, Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill defending her seat against State Attorney General Josh Hawley. McCaskill is considered one of the most vulnerable incumbents in the Senate. And the tightest Senate race of the night may be in Florida. Republican Governor Rick Scott taking on longtime Democratic Senator Bill Nelson. This one is considered a must-win for Democrats.
We have Fox team coverage live across 20 battleground states, from Scottsdale, Arizona to St. Louis, Missouri, and all the way down to Naples, Florida, where we find Peter Doocy live from Rick Scott's headquarters this evening. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Martha. Florida is home to the winter White House, and a huge issue on the final day of this Senate campaign is which candidate actually talks to President Trump the most. I spoke with Governor Scott this morning. He said that he's always calling the president, asking for things like aid after a natural disaster. But the president says he's never heard from the incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson, and that plays big into the issue of storm relief here in Florida, which is uniquely prone to hurricanes. This weekend, Governor Scott and Senator Nelson traded barbs about whether or not the state or the Senate should have their fingerprints on possible shortcomings in aid to storm victims. Another environmental issue that pits their records in Tallahassee and D.C. against each other are toxic algae blooms that flow out of Lake Okeechobee and into neighboring waterways, causing potential health problems for residents who touch or wade into them. Senator Nelson's campaign has been more moderate than a lot of Democrats elsewhere. He says he's an independent and he wants to protect Obamacare. Governor Scott's biggest focus has been on the economy. Florida is a state a lot of people move to for its attractive low tax rates, and he's warning certain economic benefits could go away if Democrats get more control. And even though this is one of the half a dozen states Republicans are going on offense, trying to unseat Democratic incumbents just in case GOP loses in a place like Nevada or Arizona, it's possible that none of these policy issues are really going to matter as much as what's happening right now above the two of them in the gubernatorial race, where the Bernie Sanders-backed Democratic candidate Andrew Gillum is up against a Republican Ron DeSantis, who surged from a distant second in the primary to a win when President Trump endorsed him. There are major questions tonight about whether or not these two people at the top of the ticket trying to appeal to different bases are going to help or hurt everybody below them on the ticket. Martha?
Peter, thank you very much.
Meanwhile, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up for grabs today. Mike Emanuel is following the battle for the House live in Washington. Mike.
Brett, good evening. Democrats need a net 23 seats in order to regain the majority, and there are many fascinating races going down to the wire. For example, Virginia's 2nd District, Republican Scott Taylor is in a very tight contest with Democrat Elaine Luria. Taylor's a retired Navy SEAL. Luria is a retired Navy officer. Virginia's 7th District, incumbent Republican Dave Bratz in a competitive race against Democrat Abigail Spanberger. She's a former CIA operative. Bratt first won this seat in 2014. To New Jersey, the 3rd District, Republican Congressman Tom MacArthur is facing Democrat Andy Kim. Barack Obama won this district twice. President Trump won it last time around. An interesting battle in the Philadelphia suburbs. Up the Garden State Parkway to New Jersey's 7th, Republican Congressman Leonard Lance is facing Tom Malinowski, a former State Department official. A hot race in the very blue state of New Jersey. To Texas and its 7th District, 9-term Republican Congressman John Culberson is facing Houston attorney Democrat Lizzie Panel Fletcher. While President Trump won Texas, Hillary Clinton won this district in the Houston suburbs. To Texas 32 in the Dallas suburbs, this features incumbent Republican Congressman Pete Sessions facing Democrat Colin Allred. Allred's a former NFL football player. Leading Democrats trying to win back the House predict they will get it done.
I'm confident Democrats will win the majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. We've anchored our strategy this year around what is the largest battlefield that we've seen in over a decade, 111 districts across America. We're investing in over 80 districts across the country.
The Republican lawmaker leading the GOP re-election effort says the strong economy should help a lot of Republicans in these House races.
There have been so many people left behind in the stagnant economy of the last 8 years, and it's time to turn it around. We've done that, and I think voters are going to give us credit for that, and that's why we're going to win the majority.
The stakes are extremely high. A Democrat House would likely slam the brakes on President Trump's agenda and lead to many new investigations. Brett?
Mike Emanuel, live on the Hill. Mike, thanks.
So tonight, Fox News is launching an entirely new system to analyze why voters vote the way they do, and it is the first real alternative to exit polling in the United States since the 1960s. Here's a live look at the Fox News decision desk. There's all the folks hard at work in there, crunching the numbers and analyzing the data that has now come in from 48 states across the country. Shannon Bream, more on what the trends are that we are already seeing in these brand new numbers. Shannon.
Yeah, well, Brett and Martha, we are very excited to show off our new improved method for covering the decisions made by voters. Fox News Voter Analysis. More than 100,000 interviews with voters nationwide to find out how they voted and why. The survey is conducted for Fox News by the NORC at the University of Chicago. First up, nearly half the voters tell us they knew all along exactly how they would vote. Not that many late deciders. Folks are entrenched. So let's look at some of the Senate races that everybody is watching. First, Indiana. Republican Mike Braun is trying to knock off incumbent the Democrat Joe Donnelly. President Trump says pretend he's on the ballot. So this is what we found. Roughly equal numbers of Indiana voters intended to express support for Trump, as many as want to show opposition, and for another third, well, he's just not a factor. Donnelly is considered one of the most vulnerable Democrats this year. Is that because he voted against Justice Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court? Well, take a look at this split among those saying that the Kavanaugh confirmation debate was important to their vote. 48% voted for Donnelly. 48% apparently voted for Braun. Now, look at that same question in Missouri, where another vulnerable incumbent Democrat, Claire McCaskill, also voted no on Kavanaugh. She's running against Republican Josh Hawley. Voters who prioritize the Supreme Court debate break for the Republicans there by 2 points. And let me show you one more from the national survey. As Americans pick their candidates, more than 8 in 10 voters say they do not trust the government. We'll have more voter analysis for you all night long.
So, Shannon, tell us how people are feeling about the government overall. Obviously, there's a lot of tension, a lot of division in the country. What are you seeing in these numbers with regard to that? Yeah,
it's interesting. Another nugget here. We asked people, how do you think the federal government is working? 72% said they're not happy at all. 44% say dissatisfied. A full 28% told us they're actually angry. We'll see if that drives their votes.
Tell us about the Fox News voter analysis and how it's different than what we had before.
Well, before you would truly get quote-unquote exit polls, people who were coming out that had voted that day. This goes back a few days, starting several days before, because we know tens of thousands of people voted in early voting. They were being missed by the old-fashioned traditional exit polls. This time, we're including all of those people, and we're also talking to people who said they didn't want to vote at all.
It will be interesting. A lot of data in there. Shannon, thank you. Let's get some first thoughts on the evening. You saw them here. Joining us at the anchor desk, Chris Wallace, anchor of Fox News Sunday, and Brit Hume, Fox News senior political analyst. Let's start with Chris. Thoughts?
Well, all day I haven't been feeling it. People say, "Are you excited?" And I say, "It's okay." And now here I am in this extraordinary space, a symphony of bells and whistles by Fox News, as we always do, with the three of you. I couldn't be more excited. This is going to be a great race, and there's so much on the line. I mean, think of it. Let's say that the Republicans were to hold on to both the Senate and the House. What a stunning reaffirmation for Donald Trump, and what a mandate for him for the final 2 years of this term. Conversely, let's say that they lose both the Senate and the House. What a rebuke to Donald Trump. What a wounded figure politically he will be for the next 2 years, and what may be most likely is a split decision, which means his life will be more complicated and difficult, with the Democrats in one house trying to investigate him and to block his agenda, but he'd have support in another. Whatever happens, it's going to be very consequential for these 2 years, and the presidential race for 2020 begins. Well, if it hasn't begun already, it'll certainly begin by midnight.
Britt, you look at these early numbers. President Trump is on this ballot.
Oh, yeah, and no president that in my memory, maybe if ever, has ever made himself as much the center of a midterm election as this president has. I remember covering Clinton in '94 when he went out and campaigned hard. Barack Obama did the same thing in 2010, to no avail in both cases, as it turned out. Their parties lost control of the House in those years. But this president has done more and it's been more about him than I can ever remember. And we will know something at the end of the voting tonight about whether there is a new and unusual factor that we saw a sample of in 2016, that this president, with his rallies and the things we didn't used to think matter a lot. Will they matter this time? Well, we'll find out tonight whether going out to these huge rallies, even when he's not on the ballot, making himself the center of things, is effective for his party or not so much. So it's just as Chris said, it could end up as a rebuke to him, or it could end up as a wash. It doesn't look at this stage as if it's going to end up as a big triumph for him.
Chris, when you look at where the president has been to that point over the last week, 10 days, it gives you a map of sort of where his priorities are and where he thinks he has the potential to have the most impact.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I would say, and let me say, having done this for a few years, don't pay attention to what politicians say, pay attention to what they do, and where they actually spend their time, particularly for a president, is the most valuable thing they do. And he has run a Senate-oriented campaign, not a House-oriented campaign. He's been in big states. He's been in areas of his base. He's trying to turn, there are 10 Democrats that are defending the seats that Trump won in 2016, and he's trying to turn those Democratic seats over to the red, to the Republicans. He has not campaigned particularly in a lot of the key swing suburban districts that are going to be so important to who controls the House. And there are a lot of House Republican leaders who not only are upset about that, but are also upset because they think that pitching the economy instead of paying so much attention to immigration and the caravan would have worked better in those suburban districts.
In our voter analysis numbers, 63% say President Trump was a factor in their vote. Now, how that breaks down in opposition or support,
we don't really know.
We don't know. But what it does say is that there is not, so far, what we're seeing, not a huge way, one way or the other, this race is breaking early before we get the raw vote totals.
It's worth noting in terms of the concern that people had that the president wasn't emphasizing the strength of the economy sufficiently, and that his party was not either. So we knew going in from all the other polling we've seen, in addition to this monster poll we have, that healthcare was a big issue, and it is. With 29% said it was their top issue. That's the largest single number. Guess what was second? Immigration. an issue that really wasn't on the horizon very much until he started campaigning on it, and the economy came in 30 to 20%. So he did succeed in one respect, and that is he elevated an issue he thinks helps him and his party to a higher spot on people's priority than it was before.
You know, I mean, it is remarkable when you look at the economic numbers, Chris, that we've seen over the past 2 years, really. The stock market has done incredibly well under this president. The economy's done really well. It wasn't a real factor in the discussion. Now, the president would say he talked about it all the time, and maybe if you watch every rally back to back, you would see him talking about it. But the pervasive message over the last couple of weeks was about the caravan.
Absolutely. The president decided to make that the issue. He says because people are more likely to vote out of anger or fear than they are out of gratitude. But the fact is, I mean, what an economic story he has to tell. 4.1% growth, 3.7% unemployment, wages finally going up, the highest since 2009. And I can tell you, there are a lot of House members and a lot of House leaders who wish he had spent more time there. Can I just say one thing? Because I know you're about to say that the polls are about to close. The polls have actually closed. I don't know if we're going to put it up on the screen, but the polls, you know, we all have done our research. Yeah. I've done my research, and we all have our favorite races that we've done research on.
That's right.
Kentucky 6. The polls have actually already closed in
half of the state, yeah.
Yeah, but they have closed in that district,
right,
which is in the eastern part of the state. Here we got it up here. And I love this because this is the one place where the polls have already closed, Kentucky 6. It's in the Lexington area, Bluegrass area. Andy Barr, been the congressman since 2012 against Amy McGrath, and this is a typical Democratic story. A Marine lieutenant colonel, combat pilot, the first female Marine combat pilot to fly F-18s. Now, there's just a small vote in, 600 votes to 400 votes, but the polls have closed in Kentucky 6. So that may give us our first indication. If Barr holds on, the red wall gets a little redder. If McGrath were to flip it, it's a Republican seat, the wave gets a little bluer.
Yeah.
Three-term incumbent, Andy Barr.
And as you say, she is sort of the typical, in many ways, Democrat candidate this time around. You've got more military veterans on the Democratic side than on the Republican side who are candidates this time around.
And I think as a group, the Democrats have turned out a better field of candidates in this midterm election than they had in many previous elections. A lot of attractive candidates out there. Some of them are out in left field, farther than you might expect that their states or districts would prefer. But some of them but there are a lot of very attractive candidates out there.
Yeah, a good recruiting class for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are counting down to the first poll closings. As we just said, we just got Kentucky 6. And once that goes, we're going to get a cascade of numbers that are flowing in here. And we have an amazing structure here to bring all of it to you, including Indiana, a Senate seat that both sides know is crucial to the balance of power.
Plus, keeping up with the scores of races across the country is a complicated process, as you can imagine. Our key race tracker is fired up in our Fox newsroom. Harris Faulkner is there, and she will take a look at that next here on Fox News Channel.
So at stake tonight, the balance of power in both the House and the Senate, as you know. And Bill Hemmer is at the billboard with how things could shake out tonight. He's way up there on the balcony.
What's Wallace's problem? He's not fired up? I'm all set.
He is now.
Come on up to the terrace here, the Data Deck Center here over in the billboard. And you guys have been talking a lot about that House district in Kentucky. I just want to show our viewers 3 different House races that may tell us a little bit early on in the night, okay? Here in the Mid-South in Kentucky, Kentucky 6. If you've been watching the news over the past couple of days, this has come up a lot. This is Lexington. Early on the night, if Andy Barr, the Republican, is even or ahead, that would mean good news for Republicans. Conversely, if Amy McGrath has a lead in that Democratic district, it could mean good things for the blue wave, the blue trickle. We'll see what it is throughout the night. But the reason we're focused on that is because we will get early results from Kentucky coming up after the 7 o'clock hour here. Now, 2 more I want to show you here. This is Virginia 5. This is Denver Riggleman. He's the Republican against Leslie Cockburn. Why are we looking at this race here? Well, what is the strength for the president throughout the night? Go back 2 years. He won this district over Hillary Clinton easily by 11 points. Is he still that popular again this year, or has he increased his popularity? That's one of the things we're watching there in the Virginia 5 district there. Come on down to Georgia. A lot of attention given to the suburbs of Atlanta. This is Karen Handel. This is the old district for Newt Gingrich, by the way, and a tough battle with Lucy McBath, the Democrat. This is suburban voters in Atlanta. northeast of the city. And why do we focus on that? Guys, I could show you countless districts across the country that are in a very similar situation, these toss-up races in the House. These are Americans who have a better than average income, $30,000 higher than the average. They have 80% of them have a college degree or better. And the race mix is interesting, 60% black, 15% African American, about 12% Hispanic. And if that governor's race is important down there in Georgia and gets the attention that we think it's getting, that could have an impact on this race. So those are just 3 right now as we try and set the table for the evening. We're watching 70 House races all across the country. But these are the 29 that we think could flip red the blue or blue the red throughout the evening here. And you mentioned about these poll closings here. You're going to see a lot of data coming here in a moment. This is 7 o'clock, 36 minutes from now. Talked about Georgia, talked about Virginia, talked about Kentucky. At 7 o'clock, 35 minutes from now, you're going to get a call here really soon on this Senate race in Indiana that's getting a lot of attention. And when I come back in about 40 minutes, I'll show you how Republicans have set themselves up for a bit of a firewall in Indiana. We'll see whether or not that holds. Brett, Martha.
All right, Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So with the big theme of the evening being control of the Congress, we're going to be referring back to a few key graphics on our big, beautiful wall throughout the course of this evening. First one, the balance of power in both the House and the Senate. When the first polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern, the numbers will zero out, and we will watch the race results as they come in real time. So every box that goes blue or red is a seat won, obviously, by each party.
Next, we'll be keeping an eye on the net gain. That's the number Democrats need to gain control of the House or Senate. As we said, the Democrats need a net gain of 23 seats to recapture the majority in the House. Anything less than that, Republicans retain control.
Then we have another fun toy over here called the probability meter. This dial takes all the data that our decision team's evaluating. It boils it down to a percentage. That percentage represents what we believe is the probability that each party will win control in the House or in the Senate. Now, we caution you, just because you see a high probability number does not mean that it's a done deal. It just means that the data is pointing in that direction, and the data, of course, is coming in through all different places throughout the course of the evening. And as we saw in 2016 on similar meters, it can change dramatically throughout the course of the night.
You just called that a big, beautiful wall.
It is.
It didn't have a Trump accent or anything. Big, beautiful. All right, while we watch all those data points, Harris Faulkner is live from our newsroom where she's keeping track of all the key races as they come in with another little toy. Harris, tell us more.
Hey, great to see you, Martha and Brett. Yes, it's called the Race Tracker, and I'm going to walk over to it. And I want you to know that the center line is where you want to watch all night long, because as races are contentious, they'll hover along this line. You're looking at the Senate, and Bill was talking about the races we're watching, in particular those 10 states where there are Democratic incumbents that are in some hot water because they were won, in some cases, by more than 30 points by the president. So we expect some of those to hover this line, states like Missouri, Indiana, and some of them are closing either at 7 or 8 p.m. So we're watching for those, some later too, but a lot of the contentious ones along this line. Let's flip to the House now. So there are 4 districts just in the state of Virginia alone and Kentucky. We expect them to hover along the yellow line, you know, like the 50-yard line. We love the NFL on Fox, you know that. So here's the goal of the Race Tracker. You literally could look at the wall, and whatever is near the 50-yard line, even without me talking, you'll know where the battleground really is in the House or the Senate. My husband loves that. I don't even have to speak, and he knows the score of the game. So I'll see you each hour, and now back to Brett and Martha.
Harris, thank you.
Harris, sure. That's cool. So we are now just over 30 minutes and counting until the first major poll closing wave of the night.
And later tonight, one of the biggest races of the night, Missouri, where Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill hopes to fend off a fierce challenge from Republican Josh Hawley. Steve Doocy is live in Springfield, Missouri, next. Welcome back to Fox News Channel, America's election headquarters, where we are counting down to the first major poll closings of the night. 6 states all closing at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and then more states obviously will close every half hour after that until 9 p.m. Polls will close at the top of each hour. Alaska will wrap us up at 1 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. We'll see how that goes. Several key races tonight will obviously decide which parties control the House and the Senate.
Yeah, so one of those obviously very critical races tonight is Missouri, where Democratic incumbent Claire McCaskill, the senator there, faces her toughest battle yet for her third term. Republicans hope that Josh Hawley will be able to flip this state from blue to red. Kristen Fisher, live with the McCaskill campaign tonight in St. Louis. Good evening, Kristen.
Good evening, Martha. This is really one of those races that could determine control of the Senate. It has been razor tight for months, and today the Democratic incumbent, Senator Claire McCaskill, said it is still too close to call. Now, this is where she's going to be on election night, but she spent the final days of this race really campaigning very hard in the red parts of this state. That's because President Trump won Missouri in 2016 by nearly 20 points. So she's been working very hard to try to convince the people that voted for him that she's a moderate, that she's not just another crazy Democrat. And those are her words. But she's up against somebody who has been enthusiastically endorsed by President Trump, the state's Attorney General, Republican Jeff Hawley. And President Trump has been campaigning for him very heavily. He's been to this state 7 times this election cycle. The last time just last night, his final stop before the polls opened. And Josh Hawley has really been promising to be in lockstep with the Trump agenda. He has said that if he is going to win, he is going to be with President Trump on immigration. He's going to be with him cutting regulation, on confirming conservative justices to the Supreme Court. And, you know, he has been saying from day one that a vote for him is going to be a vote for the Trump agenda. As for turnout here in Missouri, the state Secretary of State's office says that it has been very high. They've had a few minor issues at the polls, but nothing major, nothing that should interfere with the polls closing and the return starting to come in just about an hour and a half. Brett and Martha.
Look forward to that. Kristen, thank you.
You know, we're looking at a lot of turnout. We talked about the early vote, 38 million plus around America, and we're seeing long lines at a lot of polling places around the country. In fact, a judge has stepped in Texas, extending times at 9 polling stations in and around Houston, Harris County, also in Indiana. 2 counties there, adding about an hour, hour and a half to so people can vote. Steve Doocy is live in Springfield, Missouri, at the Patton Alley Pub. Imagine that, the Patton Alley Pub, seeing how voters in that state are feeling about the election. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Brett, I don't know about you, but after this midterm, America needs a drink. And the polls are going to close here in Missouri in about 90 minutes. I tweeted out that we are here live about half an hour ago. We got some good folks to talk to. And, in fact, Eric Schmidt, the state treasurer for Missouri, just joined us. Eric, how many times have you seen the president come to Missouri to stump for the Republicans?
A half a dozen times. I mean, Trump, the president's been to Missouri 10 times now because this is such a consequential state. It's going to be a close race. He won Missouri by 20 points just 2 years ago.
Right.
Josh Hawley, who's our attorney general, who's running for Senate, won by about the same margin. So, I mean, he was in southeast Missouri just yesterday, and the crowd was really excited. So we're expecting good things tonight.
I think last night he said, you know, midterms used to be boring. Now they're the hottest thing around.
It's exciting. That's right.
It is. All right. This woman right here, I know, Brett and Martha, you were talking about the long lines. She went to vote today. There was a problem with the name. There was a snafu. She had to call the ACLU. It took you how many hours to vote?
It was about 2 hours.
It took you 2 hours. Ultimately, though, you were able to vote. You voted for Claire McCaskill. All right.
Claire McCaskill.
Why was it Claire over Josh?
It was Claire McCaskill over Josh, but it was more so Amendment 2 over everything else.
And Amendment 2 has to do with medical marijuana.
Medical marijuana.
And I got to tell you, here at this bar tonight, a lot of people are talking about that. What's your name?
Sarah.
All right. I've got a feeling I know you probably just saw my tweet. So have you voted today?
Yes, I have.
Long line?
I actually voted at a really rural polling location, and it was very full. I didn't have to stand in the line, but it was very full, which was encouraging.
All right, very good. And this woman right here also voted for Claire McCaskill.
Absolutely.
And it was because of her stand on health care, right?
Absolutely. Like I've said before, my husband, my son's father, Sean Krause, passed away this summer because he didn't have health care.
Yeah.
And he died because he was poor in America. and it happens more often than people would like to believe.
And that was the number one issue for you.
Number one.
When the Democrats, Brett and Martha, were talking about health care, a couple of the people here at the bar, the Patton Alley Bar, that hit home, and that's why they voted for her. Of course, Josh Hawley's people are waiting for the results just about a mile from where we're standing right now. All right, back to you all in New York.
All right, have fun at the pub. Thanks, Steve.
I think he has a better spot in many ways than some of our other reporters.
That's right.
All right, coming up tonight, the man not on any ballot, but looming large over these midterms. We will talk to our all-star panel about the Trump effect and what it is going to mean tonight.
As we count down to the first major poll closings of the night here on America's election headquarters.
The Republican agenda is delivering the American dream, optimism, the American dream. Go out and vote for a Republican House and a Republican Senate and Republicans at every level of government.
The character of this country is on the ballot. Who we are is on the ballot. We can't take this for granted. We've got to fight for this. We don't boo, vote.
President Trump and former President Obama both out in force in the last few days on the campaign trail and trying to rally for various candidates around the country. Of course, it remains to be seen which side is more fired up at this point. Let's bring in the rest of our panel. Host of the Ingraham Angle, Laura Ingraham. Co-host of The Five and Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. Anchor of the Daily Briefing and co-host of The Five, Dana Perino. And former State Department spokesperson and co-host of Benson and Harf, Marie Harf. Welcome to all of you. Great to have you here. Laura, let me start with you. In the early going, your assessment of the early information that we have and how it looks tonight.
I think there are two camps in America. There's one camp that feels really battered and abused by the mainstream media, by some on the left, not everybody, but some on the left, who are still referring to a lot of Americans as deplorables, or they're stupid, or they're voting against interest if they're women voting for Trump. And they kind of the silent folks out there who don't much like to talk to pollsters and probably aren't all that fond of the media in general or politicians. And then there are the people who've been shut out of government for some time, and they want some payback. They want their say. They want to put a check on this president, and they want to send a message that, you know, even though the economy might be doing well, we don't like the way we feel when you're president. And depending on which side gets the most people out, that side will ultimately, I think, do a little bit better in this election.
Dana, how much is this the 2016 reverberation, the first time that anybody opposed to Donald Trump has a chance to express themselves? And, you know, how much of it is an assessment of where we are now?
I think that historically speaking, any president usually loses members from his own party in that first midterm election. That's just kind of standard. And it is because, as Laura was saying earlier, Americans like divided government. That's kind of how it was set up. And so there's usually a check on the system. It depends also on just how much of a wave or not you could see. It could be just, it could stop short of taking over a majority for the Democrats. It could be huge like it was in 2010 for Barack Obama after they passed Obamacare, and that became like the hot button issue. I don't think there is like one hot button issue right now. There's a few of them. Democrats focused on health care. Well, I was going to get to that, but you stole my line. That was my lead up.
I'm sorry. See, I'm not on the five.
Like we know each other so well.
I'm not on the five. I
don't. No, you're exactly right. So obviously he's on the ballot. I remember when I was at the White House, we used to try to say that, this is of course not a referendum on the president, but in 2006, when President Bush lost the majorities, it absolutely was a referendum on the president. And so you take it with the good or the bad, right? In the midterm in 2002, President Bush gained seats. That was unusual since World War II, but it can happen, and it might happen tonight.
Juan, as you look around at these races, you know, which ones are particularly interesting to you? Which ones are you going to be watching to see what kind of indication there is of Democrats and how strong their feelings are that have been described by Dana and Laura?
Well, I think one of the key dynamics that I'm watching tonight is the expansion of the playing field by Democrats. What they tried to do Martha, was to go out and get new people to vote, get young people energized, get minorities to turn out in numbers that they're unaccustomed to turning out in midterms. They wanted to go after suburban white women who may have voted for Trump in 2016, but not like the divisive type of language that he uses. So what I am going to look at, in direct answer to your question, is, for example, a state like Georgia, Stacey Abrams running against Brian Kemp in the governor's race. In that race, it really is about who gets their base to turn out, and if you can expand your base. In Florida, Andrew Gillum, also an African-American running for governor, is he able to expand the base of people who would vote? Because if you just looked at numbers, Democrat, Republican, it wouldn't look good, but it's got to be an expansion. And finally, look at Texas. Beto O'Rourke versus Ted Cruz. Beto O'Rourke really doesn't have a shot in what is, I would say, still a red state, but it's not quite as red as it used to be. But what happens if O'Rourke is able to turn out additional people, bring new voters into the mix, that would definitely shift the dynamic?
I mean, that raises the question. What we saw in 2016 was that President Trump was able to bring out voters who did not vote, typically.
Right.
So now you have Democrats on the other side of the equation trying to find who those people are.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Marie?
Democrats have also really done a good job this cycle at expanding the map and the places, particularly in the House, where they are competitive. Because for all of the problems Democrats, my party, has internally about whether we're moderate, whether we're going more progressive, in this midterm cycle, we went out and we found candidates who match their districts very well. They outraised their opponents in many, many places. So tonight, we're not just looking at Virginia or New Jersey, those House races. We're looking at Kansas. We're looking at Kentucky. We are looking at Alaska. Places Democrats have not fielded a legitimate candidate in a very long time. And I will say, Democrats have been waiting 2 long years to go out and vote today, and that's why you see happening on the ground what appears to be possibly some good signs.
But Laura, quickly, you know, for those races, in 2 years they'll be up again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they'll be running alongside a president.
I think the voters are really impatient for change. I think we saw that in 2016. They want their standard of living to improve. They want the country to be safe. There are still those security moms out there. If this really is a referendum on Trump's results, the Republicans should do pretty well tonight. Maybe they won't hold the House, but they should still do pretty well. If it's a referendum on Trump's demeanor or tone, or whether you're mad about 2016, then we'll see. But, I mean, no matter what happens tonight, what Trump's policies have been, when you're just focused on the economy, especially, even trade, they've worked.
All right, panel, thank you. Our election coverage has a new, bigger look this year.
We have expanded outdoors. We burst out of this room, and now we're outside as well, something that we like to call Fox Square. Carly Shimkus is outside for a preview tonight. Hi, Carly.
Hey, Martha and Brett, you know, Fox Square is shaping up to be the place to be tonight. People are filing in. The excitement is building. But for the folks at home that couldn't make it out here, do not worry, because we are about to bring the party to you. And we're also about to get some midterm election predictions from very excited voters. Are you guys happy to be here? We'll be back with more. Don't miss it.
As we await the first statewide poll closings of the night, let's check in on the brand new Fox Square, built to be an interactive outdoor experience as only Fox News can deliver. Carly Shimkus is live outside with more. Hey, Carly.
Hey, Brett and Martha. You know, I'm here out on Fox Square. Our midterm election viewing party is just getting underway. And one of the most exciting things about the 2018 midterm elections is the unprecedented level of interest in it. And the thing that matters most are the issues. And we're talking to a bunch of voters right now. This is Chad. Chad is from South Carolina. Chad, what drove you to the polls today?
Immigration, the issue of open borders.
And this is something that President Trump has been talking about a lot. Do you like his message?
Absolutely, 100%.
All right, now we're going to move on over to Tom. Tom, you're from Florida. Tom, you voted early, right?
I did vote early, yes.
All right, what are some of the issues that matter to you?
I just think the polls have been wrong all along and people aren't getting the facts out. And, 2016 proved a lot. So I think it's going to prove a lot to this election cycle.
Okay. All right, so you feel like DeSantis may have a chance,
I think DeSantis will win, and I think Rick Scott's going to win.
All right. So how do you feel about the blue wave?
I don't see a blue wave at all. Not at all.
Okay, now we're going to move on to a very special guest tonight. This is Phoenix. Phoenix is from Texas. His official title is Kid Reporter. He's very in tune politically. Do you have any midterm election predictions?
Well, as from Texas, I want to say I think Beto thought he would have a big chance with the Hispanic voters, but I think he's gone very far left, and my mom's an immigrant from Nicaragua, and I've talked to a lot of people in the Hispanic community, and I think some of his values are something he's running from.
I got 2 words for you. You're hired.
Yeah, good job.
All right, so everybody's excited out here. We're going to keep the party going, and we'll check in with you in a little bit.
All right, Carly, that guy's got a future, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. So we're just moments now.
Lose the hat.
All right. So moments now from the first major poll closings of the evening, just the beginning of what could turn out to be a very long night with some very high stakes.
The control of Congress on the line. Results are next as live coverage continues from America's election headquarters.
We are just seconds away now from the first statewide polls closing the 2018 midterms. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Brett Baer. This is exciting. The countdown. Gotta love this. Outside. We'll just let it play there. Polls closing. We've got Indiana, Kentucky, Virginia, Vermont, Georgia, South Carolina, and most of Florida, most of New Hampshire. Our first race calls of the night, and we can give them to you now.
There we go.
It is 7 o'clock on the East Coast, and polls have closed in half a dozen states, so the Fox News Decision Desk can now begin to project winners and losers in crucial elections across the country. Now, the 2 most closely watched races at this hour are the Indiana Senate race and the Georgia gubernatorial contest.
In Georgia, Democrat Stacey Abrams, who is vying to become the first African-American female governor in U.S. history, is in a very tight race tonight with Republican Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Too early to say who will win that contest to succeed term-limited governor in that state, Nathan Deal.
In Indiana, incumbent Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly trying to stave off a challenge from Republican businessman Mike Braun. That race also very close at the moment. Too early to declare a winner there.
But the Fox News Decision Desk can project, this is a big surprise, that independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who identifies as a Democratic socialist, will easily win a 3rd term by defeating Republican Lawrence Zupan. Sanders unsuccessfully challenged Hillary Clinton back in 2016, as you all well remember, in the presidential primaries. And some expect that Bernie Sanders may be on the list again in 2020.
And Clinton's running mate in 2016, Democratic Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, will win a 2nd term tonight by beating Republican challenger Corey Stewart, according to our Fox News voter analysis, and the raw vote total is starting to come in.
So we can also now project that Republican South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster will win his race against Democrat James Smith.
Now remember, the 2 overarching questions of the night are whether Democrats can take control of the House and whether Republicans can keep control of the Senate. It's obviously too early to make those all-important projections. We're also watching governor's races around the country that will have a big impact on 2020 as well.
So we've got the first polls closed through 7 o'clock. Chris Wallace, as you look at what we see coming in right now, any first impressions?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think it's not a particularly controversial one, but Virginia, and what I suspect is going to be a landslide re-election victory by Tim Kaine over Corey Stewart, the Republican, and he was pretty far out there. He even, at one point in the campaign, started re-arguing the birther issue about Barack Obama. He was so far to the right that the National Republican Senatorial Committee refused to endorse him. Now, you'd say, so what's the big deal? The big deal is that there are a lot of key swing House races there, and with a strong Kaine at the top of the ticket, that might help some of the Democrats in Virginia 7 or Virginia 10 in very close races with Republicans flip some seats. So we'll have to wait and see. But Kaine's strength in Virginia may help Democrats down ticket.
Yeah, there's a lot of races there. Virginia 2, Virginia 5, 7, 10, all of those pretty tight races, at least heading in to this election. Britt, your thoughts?
Just a little note about Indiana. There's some vote totals are in now from the rural and exurban counties. And Mike Braun is running ahead of Richard Murdoch, who was the Republican candidate the last time around, who lost him in kind of an embarrassing way. Enough so that Henry Olson of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, who covers this stuff very closely, thinks that Braun's leads in those places, although they're not any urban and big population areas yet, bode well for him as the night wears on. So, as I say, early returns, rural and exurban areas, but Braun doing better than his predecessor in the ticket.
Well, while we're talking about that, polls just closing in Indiana. Mike Tobin is following this key Senate race from Indianapolis. Good evening, Mike.
Well, the one thing I can tell you, Brett, is that voter turnout has been tremendous. Kyle Hupfer, the Indiana GOP chair, says they are going to blow out all of the existing models for voter turnout numbers, and he attributes that all to the enthusiasm of the Trump voters. Of course, the Democrats have a different spin on that, and they point to the fact that several precincts in Bloomington ran out of polls. That's in Monroe County, one of, if not the most liberal counties in Indiana that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. There were some hang-ups at some of the precincts causing some delays, so you're not going to have a real clean line as far as when those polls are closing. But again, tremendous enthusiasm. And one thing that has been consistent, without exception, the Indiana voters with whom I spoke today said that this has less to do with the candidates on the ballot, Mike Braun and Joe Donnelly, everything to do with a referendum on Donald Trump. Guys, back to you.
Mike Tobin in Indianapolis. Mike, thanks.
So Indiana, just one of the critical races that we're watching right now. Both Nevada and Texas, states where Republican incumbents are in big fights to hold on to their seats.
In Pennsylvania, incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey hoping to win a third term. New Jersey is a seat that's become unexpectedly close between Democratic incumbent Bob Menendez and Republican Bob Hugin.
Also Montana, everybody watching this race closely. President Trump would very much like to defeat Tester there in that race. He'd like to see him fail. Finally, Arizona, where Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally is hoping that she can win, take over Jeff Flake's seat against Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema.
And that is a tight race. Alicia Acuna is following it all from McSally's campaign headquarters in Scottsdale. Alicia.
Hi, good evening, Brett. Good evening, Martha. You are exactly right. This is going to be a fight to the finish. Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally and Democrat Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema have really been just so close to each other in the polls in the weeks leading up to this race. This is a state that President Trump won by 3.5 points, and McSally has really aligned herself with the president and his policies. We will see tonight if that pays off. Now, McSally has made border security and immigration her #1 issue on the campaign trail. This two-term congresswoman from one of the most competitive districts in the country has received a lot of help in these last weeks from President Trump, who hosted a rally here. The vice president made a stop here, as well as the president's son, Don Jr. The message to voters: don't be complacent. Sinema, on the other hand, has been working against a lower voter registration population of Democrats in this state. She has formulated herself as the centrist in this race, even going so far as to say she's not really running as a Democrat or a Republican. To win, she will need not only independents, of which there are more than registered Dems, but she will also need those crossover Republican women and younger voters. Healthcare is her cornerstone issue. This is expected to be a very late night in Arizona. The polls close at 8 p.m. local time, 10 o'clock Eastern. Back to you.
Alicia Acuna live in Scottsdale. Thanks. With the data beginning to flow, let's go back upstairs to the data deck where Bill Hemmer is standing by at the touchscreen.
Yeah, Brett, Martha, good evening yet again. I'm going to show our viewers right now. We'll take you into Indiana because the We're just getting a little bit of results now, and you're going to see the states start to fill in here. Vermont, the independent, light shade of blue. A little bit of blue here in Virginia. Doesn't mean a whole lot right now, so we'll gauge it throughout the night and let you know as we know how to interpret these results. But I'll go into Indiana right now because it's starting to get a little bit of red as Republican, blue as Democrat. Joe Donnelly against the Republican, Mike Braun, the businessman. A little bit of, 96,000 to 64,000 votes coming in. This is what you always watch in Indiana. This is Marion County, Indianapolis. Far too early for any results to come back in, but we'll watch that throughout the evening and try to give you a bit of a projection. I think based on history, the best way to understand this matchup here was Joe Donnelly back in 2012. He won his Senate race by 6 points. But if you watch here now at the presidential level to see what Donald Trump did, just 2 years ago, an easy winner all over the state of Indiana, beat Hillary Clinton by 20 points. So we'll see what sort of metric we get on that throughout the night. The next closing is coming up at about 7:30, and I think one thing to really key in on is this Senate race in West Virginia. I'll take you there right now. The Democrat is Joe Manchin up against the Republican Patrick Morrisey, the AG there. Joe Manchin was a popular Democratic governor in that state. He voted against Brett Kavanaugh. Reverse that. He voted against the tax bill. He voted for Brett Kavanaugh just about a month ago. And this was Manchin's result in 2012. A lot of blue all over West Virginia. But if you come back to the presidential level, just 2 years ago, you see what the president did there. That is strong popularity in the Mountaineer state, getting nearly 70% of the vote in West Virginia. So quickly here on the closing map, polling's coming up in about 21 minutes. Talk about West Virginia. Talk about North Carolina, talk about Ohio as we go throughout the night. Brett, Martha, back to you.
All right, Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So meanwhile, new information coming in now from our voter analysis surveys showing that President Trump was a factor in the vote for more than 60% of Americans. Chris Wallace, Britt Hume, Laura Ingraham, Juan Williams, Dana Perino, and Marie Harp all standing by with their look at what's going on.
By the way, we should look at this map, and the darker the states are, the more President Trump mattered to their vote, and it was a factor to their vote. Obviously, it factors all over, Chris. And it's really his policies. But as Laura mentioned earlier, his presentation on the trail and how he talks about different elements and things that happen that may factor in.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in terms of his policies, those are controversial as well. He certainly has accomplished what he's wanted to accomplish, but there are a lot of Democrats, and a lot of people who are going to vote Democratic tonight who don't like what he has accomplished. You think of something like health care. He very much wanted to repeal and replace Obamacare, and obviously Democrats thought that was gave a big opening to them on the issue of pre-existing conditions. And frankly, Republicans, as I interviewed them on Fox News Sunday over the last couple of months, never got a good answer on that, because the fact is that repeal and replace does significantly weaken the pre-existing condition protection. And so that was a big issue. Supreme Court justices, obviously conservatives are thrilled that he put two very conservative justices on the court. But there are a lot of people who don't like that. So, I mean, the issues aren't all just one way. If you were a conservative, you probably liked it. As the president would say, promises made, promises kept. If you're a Democrat or favor Democratic policies, then you're not so happy with that. And in addition, of course, there is the larger-than-life personality of the president. And that is something that people have strong opinions on, too.
We should point out that on the bottom of your screen, you're going to see some of the vote totals coming in. Indiana, for example, we've got up on the board here, where Mike Braun has an early lead. But some of those districts and counties are the rural areas, as Britt mentioned earlier. OK, Dana?
Well, I wondered if you wouldn't mind if we could pull up that map again that said that President Trump was a factor, because where you pointed out that the darker green states are the ones where it matters. So I noticed Wyoming. That's probably very good for President Trump, right? So that looks very good. You look at Virginia, where he was also a big factor. Probably not very good for somebody like Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, who was in a really tough race in Virginia 10 in those D.C. suburbs. Maybe not so good for her in that, if President Trump was a big factor. The two that I'm actually really curious about was that New Mexico. That was one of the ones. And so you've got border issues there. You have an economy that is, they're trying to get it going. You have a big governor's race out there. And then the other one was Pennsylvania. And because there was so much redistricting there after that Supreme Court decision, I don't know which way that will play. It'll be interesting to find out. Maybe we'll know more in a little bit.
Yeah, if we could, let's take a look at that map again. And some of the darkest green areas are places like New York, also New Jersey, and
California, Vermont, but Wyoming is fourth.
And that's one of the, obviously one of the issues there was from the tax reform as well. And that has been something that people in New York and New Jersey have been very unhappy about, and in California as well, Brett.
One of the things that's striking about what our poll has shown, this massive poll we did, is that the tax cut is underwater. Not by a lot, but it's underwater. Now, you have a tax cut, and the economy grows like mad, and stock market's over the moon, right? And your tax cut's unpopular. Now, how can that be? I'll tell you, I think what happened there, and it happens almost every time, is Republicans are for tax cuts not so much because they want people to have money in their pockets so they'll spend it, although they're for that as well. They want to see the economy grow, and they think tax cuts help it to do that. But what happens in the debates over tax cuts, it always comes down to who gets what in the cut itself, not the larger benefit to the overall economy. So that connection was never made by the Republicans, and I think part of the result is what you see tonight. You've got a roaring economy in the wake of tax cuts, and the tax cut's not popular.
And that raises the question about how well they sold it.
Exactly right.
How well they discussed it.
Exactly the argument
Yep.
they use to sell it, and it's a trap, and Republicans fall into it every time. Their critics say, well, look who's getting this and look who's getting that. In fact, this was not a tax cut for the rich. The rich didn't do very well in this tax cut. It was very much a middle-class tax cut. Even that point didn't get sold. But the one that really didn't get sold was the growth component.
Laura, the president did talk about the economy on the trail, despite reporting that he didn't. There was an appeal to make him talk about it more. But you look at our vote total, approval of President Trump on border security, even split, 50-49. And immigration is a high issue in everything that we see in the numbers here.
Immigration is a 1, 2, or 3 issue for most voters, so it usually settles around 3, and the third most important issue. I think a lot of Republicans are frustrated that the wall hasn't gotten built. They're directing their frustration, I think, at Congress. I think, Trump is on the ballot, obviously, but the president is more popular than Congress, both Republicans and Democrats. And that's nationally. And I think we have to remember that President Trump has been carrying this party on his back for the last 3 or 4 weeks especially. You also need great candidates, and you need candidates who can tell the story. Britt is exactly right about this tax cut. $1,200 might not mean a lot to a lot of rich people in Manhattan and Washington, D.C., but it means a heck of a lot to a mom in Lexington, Kentucky, who hasn't taken a vacation in 3 years. That money actually is real money to them. And I think, again, telling the story of America, the Republicans don't seem to be able to do that. The Democrats are better at the emotional anecdotes, tugging at your heartstrings, the kid who can't get his procedure covered by insurance. And it's very emotional. And people like emotion. It's good. Get away from the charts and graphs. Get right to the people of the country, and I think you usually will do better.
All right, panel, stand by. We're counting down to the next round of poll closings at the bottom of the hour. 3 states, including West Virginia and Ohio, both states that could have a crucial say in which party controls the U.S. Senate.
Coming up, we're going to talk about the fight for control of Congress with former DNC chairman and Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell.
Donald Trump. The president has hit 11 states in the last 8 days of campaigning. John Roberts is live on the North Lawn of the White House with more on that. Good evening, John.
Brad, Martha, good evening to you. Pick whatever sports or political metaphor you want. President Trump believes he has done everything possible to try to turn out the vote for Republican candidates. All that's left is to watch and see if everything was enough.
We're going to have a great Tuesday. That's for sure.
President Trump's campaign schedule showed just how much is at stake for him in today's elections. 30 events since Labor Day, culminating with a 3-state blitz yesterday.
Reject the Democrat politics of anger, division, destruction.
On the line is President Trump's ambitious agenda, which has been met with near universal opposition from Democrats. Even with control of both houses, the president found it impossible to repeal Obamacare and pass immigration reform. But Democrats are saying, hold on, we do want to work with the president.
Democrats want to work with our Republican colleagues to pass comprehensive immigration reform in a bipartisan way, one that includes investments in border security that are tough and fair and smart.
Nancy Pelosi, who would become Speaker of the House, at least for the interim, insists a Democratic Congress would be open and transparent.
We have a responsibility to find common ground where we can, stand our ground where we can't. But we have to try.
But those pronouncements stand in sharp contrast with how some Democrats see President Trump's future.
I wake up in the middle of the night and all I can think about is I'm going to get him. Impeachment, impeachment.
Others have been champing at the bit to take control of House committees and investigate everything from possible Russia collusion to the president's cell phone use.
Certainly we're going to have oversight committee hearings on the president's use of the cell phone.
The White House does believe the Democrats will probably try to tie the president up in knots all the way through to November 2020. They do say that there's probably some nuts and bolts running government issues that they'll be cooperating with Democrats on. There might even be room for bipartisanship on issues like drug pricing and infrastructure. But the president's big ticket items like immigration and tax reform, the Democrats take control of the House, Brett and Martha, likely dead in the water.
Interesting to see if we hear from the president tonight. Either way, John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks.
So tonight, Democrats are defending 10 key Senate seats in states that President Trump won in 2016. Among those, West Virginia, where the polls are about to close in just a few minutes. Joe Manchin hoping for a win there. In Florida, Rick Scott hoping for an upset against longtime incumbent Bill Nelson. And in North Dakota, one of Trump's fiercest allies, Kevin Cramer, as a congressman there, is hoping that he can unseat incumbent Heidi Heitkamp. Let's go over to Pennsylvania, where Senator Bob Casey is running for his third term.
Joining us now, former Pennsylvania governor and DNC chairman Ed Rendell in Philadelphia. Governor, thanks for being with us. You know, we're seeing some early numbers from our voter analysis suggest that Democrats could have a pretty good night in some areas, including the Rust Belt. When you look at 2016 and you look at what you're looking at tonight, what do you see?
Well, Pennsylvania is going to deliver a body blow to President Trump tonight. His hopes of carrying Pennsylvania in 2020 are going to be pretty dim after this tomorrow morning. We have two Trump-endorsed, strongly endorsed candidates for governor and senator who are going to lose by mid-double digits. Governor Wolf and Senator Casey are going to get reelected easily. Democrats are going to pick up a minimum of 5 red congressional seats, maybe, if all goes well, as many as 8. And this is all over the state. Connor Lamb in southwest Pennsylvania, of course, southeast Pennsylvania, 4 pickups of congressional seats. But seats in Harrisburg and Erie are really in play. The last polls had Democrats leading in one area and a Democrat a point or two behind in another area.
Governor?
Because the anger, I have never seen, there's a saying in politics that hate's more important than love. And the anger that's been manifested by this president among Democratic voters and independent voters and some moderate Republicans is palpable. You can almost feel it. I was in an African-American district today where there were 6 divisions in one big recreation center. And in those 6 divisions, they were at almost 50% of the vote at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's pouring rain all day in Philadelphia. If you had told me it was going to pour rain and it was an off-year election, I'd have said we're lucky if we get 25, 30% for the entire day. They're going to hit 50, 55% in those divisions. And I talked to the people, and it had nothing to do with we didn't have a competitive race in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia. It was all about sending a message to President Trump.
So, Ed, when you look at all of this and you think about the economy and you look at the unemployment number at 3.7%, wages increasing 3.1%, you've got a lot of very good news that has happened over the past couple of years. Is that, in terms of what you're seeing, that's not registering with people?
With some people it is, but it's not registering. Look, most of our suburbs are middle class and upper middle class. And yet, Republican candidates are going to get shellacked in the suburbs. Those people are the people who've done well by the stock market doing well by the economic recovery. And yet they're voting against the president because they don't want a divided America. They don't want, the president said it was his tone, he should tone things down. That's absolutely right. He shouldn't be talking about a made-up caravan. Nobody with a half a brain thinks that
it's
there
not
are
a
smallpox
made-up caravan.
carriers.
There's actually a caravan, and there are several
But
of
with
them.
smallpox and leprosy being carried by people?
No, you
with
just said a
M13
made-up
carried?
caravan. There is a caravan, and it is
Well,
an issue.
It's an issue, but only an issue in President Trump's mind. These people are not trying to get into America illegally. They're seeking asylum, which has always been the right of people all over the world to come to America to seek asylum if you're in danger or if you're fleeing political repression.
Quickly, Ed, I want to
They're not
ask you
trying
one
to
more
sneak
thing.
into the border.
If Democrats take over the House, what is your advice to the leadership? Really aggressively
Don't just-
investigate the president and his administration, or try to get big deals done like infrastructure or something else?
Legislate, legislate, legislate. Don't investigate, investigate, investigate. You can have some targeted investigations, but get things done. I believe we can pass an immigration bill that the president would sign and can get through the Senate, and an infrastructure bill. Two very important things for America. Legislate first.
Former Governor of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell. Ed, we really appreciate your time.
So the final votes are now being cast in 3 states. Polls will close from now in West Virginia, Ohio, and North Carolina.
Plus, live coverage of 2 neck-and-neck races, the battle for Georgia governor and whether Republican incumbent Senator Dean Heller can survive a serious challenge in Nevada.
Ron.
Welcome back to America's election headquarters, and it's another countdown. It's really countdowns all night. Every half hour till we get to 9, and there's the next poll closing.
There we go. 7:30 now, and polls have just closed in 3 more states, including 2 of national interest in this election, West Virginia and Ohio.
In West Virginia, Senator Joe Manchin is trying to fend off a challenge by Republican Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. It's too early to declare a winner in that race at this hour.
Let's take a look at Ohio, the governor's race there. Former Republican Senator Mike DeWine locked in a very tight race right now with Democrat Richard Cordray, who served as President Obama's first director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We don't have enough data yet there to project a winner in terms of who's going to succeed Governor John Kasich.
Also in Ohio, the Democrat who succeeded DeWine in the Senate 12 years ago, Sherrod Brown, is currently ahead of his Republican challenger, Congressman Jim Renacci, although Fox is not yet ready to make a projection there. You know, I do want to put up this one race. We've been watching Kentucky 6, and this is Andy Barr with a third-term incumbent up against Amy McGrath, the Democrat. And right now, it's a Democrat plus, what is that, 6, almost 6? That is interesting, as you see the percentages coming in there. More than 40% in. The fact that she's leading at this point in that bellwether race in Kentucky could be an indication that Democrats may be having a pretty good night in that race.
A district that President Trump won by 15 points in Kentucky. And as you see, and she's the kind of candidate that we've been talking about. She's a former military, first-time candidate, woman, obviously, and fits a number of the categories that Democrats have been fielding very strong candidates.
You know what else she did? She ran on health care. She talked about her mother fighting polio. She told the story, as Laura mentioned before, on an emotional front. We are finding more data in our numbers. Let's dig back into the numbers. Shannon Bream joins us with some of the results of our all-new Fox News voter analysis.
Yeah, and you know, Martha and Brett, as we've told you before, this is a little different this year because it includes early voters. We know tens of millions of people got their votes in earlier. So we talked to them, too, along with people who are voting today. We've talked to more than 100,000 voters nationwide for their insights and their decisions about this important midterm election. Let's look at the Georgia governor's race. It has been a contentious one, with Democrats lobbing accusations about voter suppression. The Republican candidate, who also happens to be Georgia's Secretary of State, suggesting the Democrats could have been attempting to hack the voter registration database. So how confident are Georgia voters that those who want to be able to vote will be able to? So for all the controversy, they're actually pretty optimistic. Close to 3/4 said they're very or somewhat confident that all eligible voters there in Georgia will be able to vote. In a similar vein, Georgia voters were asked how easy they found the voting process to be. Overwhelmingly, they said no problems, not difficult, 87% to 12%. Democrat Stacey Abrams, if elected, would be Georgia's first black governor. Now, is that important to voters in the state? Only 39% said that was a big factor for them, but not surprisingly, those voters are going overwhelmingly for Abrams. Now let's turn to another tight race, West Virginia, another key battle in the race for Senate, where Democrat Joe Manchin is trying to defend his seat in a state the president won by 42 points. Now, he's running against Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. It is shaping up to be a very close race. First up here, let's take a look at union households, which historically have been a source of strength for Democrats. They are breaking for Manchin by 13 points, 54 to 41%. But on the flip side, voters who work in the coal industry, that's very important, in that state. They're backing the Republican by 19 points. Morrisey's been hitting Manchin for his support of Hillary Clinton even after, years ago, she said that her policies could put a lot of coal households out of work. We'll keep tracking all the states and the new data as it comes in. Brett and Martha, back to you.
Okay, and we make the decisions based on the combination of what we're seeing on the voter analysis plus the raw vote total.
Yeah, and there's so much to crunch there because a lot of this data, we got over the last few days as it was coming in, but a lot of that paired up with what we're getting today. So the combination is very important, but we're seeing, as you are in some of these early bellwether places, what's really driving people, and it hints, at what we may see across the night.
Yeah, and because there's so much early voting, there may be some places that we look at where you're going to get a lot more vote in early in the night, but then you're still going to be waiting for some of the outlier areas to come in later. So it might look like there's more vote in than there actually is, and it might take us a little bit while to actually call it because of that.
But we're here.
It's math.
Yeah.
And that's not my best subject.
Told me there'd be no
I hope
math.
it's better for you guys than it is math.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. So let's bring in some more of our great panelists tonight. Whole new group joining us now. Steve Hilton, host of the Next Revolution here on Fox News. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor. Mo Elleithee, former communications director for the DNC and also a Fox News contributor. Katie Pavlich, columnist for The Hill and a Fox News contributor. And Mark Thiessen, Washington Post columnist and also a Fox News contributor. Great to have you guys with us this evening. Mark, let me start with you, and we'll go back down the line here. What stands out to you at this point in the evening?
Well, that race in Kentucky is really interesting. We talked about this on Special Report a few weeks ago about how this is going to be the bellwether race. This is a district that the candidate won 2 years ago by 22 points. And Donald Trump won it by 15, as you pointed out. But when the race started, he was behind Amy McGrath by 15 points in the first poll. It tightened, particularly after the Kavanaugh nomination. All of a sudden, it tightened, and now it was a toss-up in Real Clear Politics, literally tied. Not even +1 or +2, either going every way. So this is going to be the race that I'm watching to see whether this blue wave ends up hitting a red wall, and whether the red wall can hold against the blue wave nationally. Because if the Democrats can pick up that kind of a seat, it's a sign that they're going to have a very good night.
The administration sent 3 cabinet secretaries to campaign for Barr, and they put in some effort to try to get him across the finish line. Katie, that is an interesting race to watch because it's one that people focus on early.
We always talk about how politics are all local. President Trump has tried to make this race all about national politics, but for as much attention as the far left wing of the Democratic Party has gotten, earlier this year, Democrats actually got pretty smart in looking at local races and local districts. Conor Lamb was one of those candidates in Pennsylvania. Amy McGrath in Kentucky is another one, putting forward real candidates who have blue-collar backgrounds, who are veterans, who are more on the Democratic side than they are the Republican, obviously, but they're not these far left cases that we see coming out of Queens, for example. And so the biggest question is whether President Trump has been able to nationalize this case and whether these local candidates who are focusing on issues that Hillary Clinton left behind in 2016 in places like Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Michigan, if those things can really come to fruition for Democrats again, and if Democrats can regain all of those seats that they lost to President Trump in 2016.
Mo.
I think the point that Katie just made can't be stated enough. Democrats nominated candidates that fit their district across the board. That's how you could get an Ocasio-Cortez in Queens and how you could get an Amy McGrath or a Conor Lamb in other states. And what's really interesting is across the board, when you look at these districts and what Democratic candidates in the House races were talking about, it was health care. It wasn't the same. If all you did was spend your life watching cable news, you might not recognize what some of these candidates were talking about out there. It was a different issue set.
Think about that. 8 years ago, Republicans were constantly on health care. Obamacare, again and again and again, and it won big.
Tea Party.
Now, it's the opposite.
The impact a lot of families were feeling. And I think the way the Republicans, particularly House Republicans, litigated themselves on this issue without offering a replacement as they were trying to repeal it ended up being a very damaging thing for them. And some of that is coming to fruition tonight.
All right, the top issue facing the country on health care, we have one of those maps. This is purple, just in case you can't see it there. The darker is the highest percentage of voters saying health care is the top issue. Maine actually had the highest percentage, and they had just adopted Medicaid expansion through a ballot initiative. Oklahoma had the lowest percentage, worried about health care at 18%. And obviously, the president won Oklahoma by quite a bit. Molly?
I think it's a bit unfair to say that House Republicans didn't have a plan for replacing Obamacare. They actually did, and they passed it, and it went to the Senate, and it was voted down by 1 vote. And I think that speaks to another issue that's happening in this election, which is the general realignment we're seeing. We've talked a lot about the realignment in the Republican Party, where Donald Trump was able to attract a lot of working-class voters, regions that had sort of lost trust in Republican capability of handling domestic issues. At the same time, it's also a realignment for Democrats, and one of the groups that they've gotten into their fold are Never Trump Republicans, people who voted for Romney but were unable to vote for Donald Trump. And they, might seem weird that you would align with a far-left group or far-left people in the Democratic Party, but they are united in their belief that orange man bad, and that puts them together and gets them to vote in a block.
Steve.
So I totally agree with that, and I want to take that point a little bit further. One of the things I'm going to be really interested in as we get more data through the night is the composition of the electorate. We hear a lot that maybe there's a lot more young people, but also the income distribution. Because I think in many ways this election is going to turn into style versus substance. If you look at what the president has actually achieved on the substance, on any measure, it's a pretty successful 2 years. Terrific economy, trade deals renegotiated, delivering his promises. But to some of those people, particularly those who may be economically more comfortable, who aren't necessarily worried about daily reality, they can afford to actually register a protest against someone who they really hate. And it's all not about the substance of President Trump, but his style, what he says, how he behaves. And I think the details of what the electorate looked like will tell us a bit about that, because I have a feeling what we're going to see tonight is the revenge of the elites for 2016.
Yeah, and it goes to the point that, the economy has been doing really well, and it's almost as if people sort of put it in their back pocket and said that this is sort of a given. Yeah. That this situation, this improving economy, is just sort of the way it goes. We had a long recession and it has bounced back. They're not necessarily perhaps giving the president credit for the tax cuts or deregulation or all of the changes at the small business level that allowed people to depreciate equipment, all of those things that have stimulated some of that growth, Mark.
So you're absolutely right. If you look at the economic data, I mean, literally almost every group in America is doing better. There's record levels, low unemployment for people without a college degree, African Americans, Hispanics, manufacturing jobs doing better. The economy is booming. But President Trump made a major strategic gamble going into this election. He decided not to run on that. He decided to run on immigration, Kavanaugh and the caravan, right? And so, as a result, we just saw his closing ad that his campaign prepared was this: it's morning in America, everything's doing better. And he killed that ad in favor of a very dark ad about immigration. And so he made the choice not to campaign on that, not to run on that issue. And we don't know how it's going to turn out tonight. That might be a stroke of genius, or it could be a total disaster. We don't know, but it was a strategic choice the president made not to emphasize those issues.
Quickly, Katie.
If you watched his rallies over the past 4 days, these 10 rallies in 4 days, he's actually equally treated the economy and the caravan. And the president would argue that immigration is not necessarily just an issue about illegal immigration. It's a national security issue. And by the way, illegal immigration also affects the economy in every single sector.
But he pulled an ad.
Healthcare, whether it's health, doesn't matter if he's talking about it. He's talking about health.
It does.
If I could just finish and say that illegal immigration affects every sector of the economy, whether it's healthcare on the local level, schools, security, crime, law enforcement, local resources, federal resources, all of which the president has talked about. And he has indeed talked about the economy repeatedly on the campaign trail in these rallies. So to say that he hasn't been running on it because he decided not to run one ad,
His
I think
closing
is
message.
not.
It is very popular for DC elites to say that it's an unpopular message, but it's worth remembering that Manchin, Sinema, McCaskill, Donnelly all backed border enforcement in the closing days.
Yes.
Those are close. Those are all close races. So if it's such a bad issue,
I'm not
why were
saying it's a bad
Democrats
issue. I'm
also
saying
doing
it
it
might
as well?
be.
It is an
We're going to
economic
let you
issue.
guys fight over the commercial break, and we're going to bring you back. We are quickly approaching what will be the largest single batch of poll closings of the entire evening. Polls set to close in 16 states coming up at the top of the hour.
And we will check in with some of the key races that are shaping the fight for control of the House and the Senate. Not a lot of those little boxes filled in yet. We got a long way to go here, folks. America's election headquarters continues live from New York City right after this.
And be there more.
We are now inside 30 minutes from the next round of poll closings. As we mentioned, 16 states, all at the top of the hour. And among them will be some critical races, including the race for governor and Senate in Florida, and another close race in Tennessee between Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn and former Governor Phil Bredesen. And that could be a deciding factor which party controls the U.S. Senate come January.
Yeah, it sure could. And obviously, we're watching all of this as it's coming in this evening, and we will, in a few moments, have some more key races that we can take a look at.
We should point out that we're getting a lot of individual states coming forward with polls staying open for an hour or two because of the lines, and judges are weighing in, issuing orders to keep those polling places open, which is an interesting thing. Let's get a check on some of the key race results coming in right now. One of the most interesting House races we've been watching, Kentucky 6. Let's head upstairs to our newsroom and Harris Faulkner. Harris.
Oh, let me tell you with the race tracker what Kentucky 6 has been doing. Can you see it up here? It's in a light blue right now, which means that Democrats are seeing some progress as those votes are being counted. But do you know that it has switched back and forth 4 or 5 times between blue and red, or that light red color? So what does that mean? That means that Andy Barr, who's the incumbent Republican there, is in a big battle. Remember, this is the 50-yard line in this. The yellow matches my dress. That means that these are in the greatest amount of play. As we fan out, Virginia 2 is another one, and let me tell you why this is so important. That is Scott Taylor's district. It's Virginia Beach. It's middle-class burbs. It's a place where Democrats were hoping to set a trend tonight if they could pick up one of those key Virginia districts and set a bellwether trend. Virginia 7 is a little bit different. That's an urban area, including Richmond. That's Republican Dave Bratt's seat. That's moving closer now away from that 50-yard line. So more votes are counted, but more importantly, more votes in the counties and areas that support Dave Bratt are being counted. So as they get close to the Crimson area over here, closer to being called and away from this line, that's what we're watching. Virginia 10's not up here yet. But let me tell you about Virginia 10 and why it's so important. It's a swing district, and I heard you guys talking about this. Washington Suburbs, District 10. It's upscale. If Democrats can pull a Virginia 10 district, if it ends up on their side of the board for much of the night and away from this play line, this too close to call line, that could be a bellwether for how Democrats do in upscale suburbs, places like Minnesota 3rd District and other areas that we're watching tonight. So remember, if you just turn off the sound of my voice and you only look at the board, you can tell that there's a battle going on right now for Virginia 2 and Kentucky 6. And we know that those are important areas. Democrats think they can start a blue wave with some of those Virginia districts. But it could be a big block tonight for Republicans. Next time I see you, I'll go through the Senate races. But right now, a lot of the action is on this side of the House. Real quickly, you've got North Carolina 9, Mecklenburg County there. It's moving closer to the Crimson line. 2 things in play there. Not just how many votes or the percentage that have been counted, but who likes Republicans there, turning that a darker shade of red. Also, Ohio 1, we're watching that. Back to you guys.
Okay, Harris, thank you.
Yeah,
We've got
sure.
up on the board here these Virginia races and Kentucky. And we looked at them early and knew early that they were going to be kind of bellwethers. It looks like Barbara Comstock, the incumbent Republican, is in trouble in Virginia 10. And Jennifer Wexton, a state senator, looks in position to pull that out. Remember, Virginia is purple, but it's a little bit bluish purple in recent years.
These are obviously areas right outside of Washington, D.C., many of them. A lot of pressure on President Trump in some of those areas, and these have been uphill battles for Barbara Comstock. Dave Bratt, we're also watching only 35% of that vote in right now, and he appears to be ahead at the moment.
Keep it here. America's Election Headquarters continues after the break. Welcome back. We are looking at the Indiana Senate race, and we are getting more raw vote totals in. 21% in. Mike Braun with a lead, significant lead. What is interesting is there is some confidence in the Republican quarters inside Indiana, we're being told, that some of the numbers are matching where they thought he needed to be, Braun, to upset the incumbent Democrat Joe Donnelly. Now, this is a race that if Republicans pull off, it makes it a lot tougher for Democrats to really take over control of the Senate. They'd have to run a different path. They were thinking Indiana was largely in the bag.
It would be a pickup, obviously, for Republicans, and it's been an interesting race to watch. Joe Donnelly was a no on Kavanaugh, which is one of the important issues here. But in general, he's been trying to run as close to Mike Braun as he possibly can and to portray himself as very moderate. That's something that's been successful for him in Indiana. One of the other interesting elements here is that Lucy Bretton ran as a Libertarian candidate, and Joe Donnelly has been trying to portray her as the true conservative in this race, and has suggested that Mike Braun, might have voted for Hillary Clinton last time around. So they are very close ideologically. At least that's the way they're trying to portray themselves in this race. And as you can see, at 22% in, long way to go here, but Mike Braun appears to be doing well.
You could also look at our probability meter in the corner of the screen over that way. The House at 79% goes to the Democrats, and now 57% that the Republicans hold on. And that has ticked down through the night, suggesting that they could have some tight races ahead to try to keep the majority. Again, the majority 51. You're looking at, as they add up on the screen here, 42-25. Right now, Republicans have 51. Democrats have 47, plus 2 independents caucus with the Democrats. So a lot of info on the screen there, but know that we're looking at some tight races, including Indiana.
And then Missouri, which will be set to close at 8 o'clock. That's another obvious place where Republicans hope that they can pick up, that they can flip that seat from Claire McCaskill to Josh Hawley. It's been so tight, that race, throughout the entire course of the election so far. And we're waiting for some numbers to come in there as well.
What the Virginia race has told us is that there is at least a mini wave, and Kentucky 6 tells us that too. Whether that wave crashes before the Appalachian, trail or continues through the country, we shall see.
Republicans hope to hold sort of a heartland triangle that they're working on through the middle of the country that they hope will help them continue to do well there. So, and as you say, and when we saw Tim Kaine's race early on as well, as Chris was saying, that was an obvious indicator that there was some strength for Democrats in Virginia. A lot of people obviously work in the government in that area, and there's a lot of opposition to President Trump in some of those places that have been pretty hard fought. If you look at some of the economy as the issue, I think we have the map of the heat map on the issue of the economy. It is a big issue through the country, but it is not a driving force in some of these races early on that we're looking at. You're looking at the balance of power at the U.S. Senate now. But the economy, as we talked about earlier, is strong. The president talks about it, but it doesn't seem to have sunk in
in some of these early races that is what they're voting on.
Yeah, and healthcare, as we were talking about earlier, has been a pervasive theme for these Democrats as they have been campaigning throughout the course of this whole race. And you think about it, the tax reform bill that was passed by Republicans in the House included the repeal of the individual mandate. It was a main structure of the healthcare bill that they repealed when they fell short of being able to repeal the whole thing. And that's been a very strong message in some of these early districts that we've seen kick in. And that is one of the main factors that we're seeing in terms of strength so far for issues, as far as Democrats are finding some strength.
You know, Chris and Britt, when they come on the set, there's a lot of stuff that happens.
Could you tell that they were coming in to sit down?
There's stuff falling down. You're looking now at the balance of power in the House. Gentlemen, we were talking about those early races, and they are showing us some movement, especially in Virginia.
Yeah, and in Virginia 10, but in fairness, it doesn't matter whether it's in fairness to her or not, Barbara Comstock, who's been the congresswoman there for a period of time, that is a seat that should, if you look at the demographics of it, of the population, should be held by a Democrat. And because Barbara Comstock was such an effective candidate, she was able to be a Republican, winning in a kind of Democratic-leaning district, the suburbs outside Washington, out towards Loudoun County in Virginia. But she's in a race this year against Jennifer Wexton, as you pointed out, a state senator. And as we've also pointed out, at the top of the ticket, you've got Tim Kaine, who's running a very strong race, his re-election as senator. And Barbara Comstock is in a world of trouble right now.
Yeah, 59% in, and Wexton has a strong lead in that race, and we're seeing some of those other Virginia races as well. And Indiana, we're waiting on Marion County for that Senate race. That is obviously a heavy Democratic area, but so far Braun is leading in some of the areas that he needs to be leading in as the countdown continues to our next poll closings, some of the biggest of the night. It is 8 o'clock on the East Coast, and polls have just closed 16 more states as well as Washington, D.C., including 5 with highly competitive elections that will help determine the control of the U.S. Senate. Missouri, Tennessee, New Jersey, Mississippi, and Florida, which also, of course, has a crucial gubernatorial election.
Yeah, one of the closest of these Senate races, as I said a moment ago, has clearly been Missouri, where Democratic incumbent Claire McCaskill is fighting to hang on at this point against challenger Josh Hawley, the state's attorney general. Way too close to call this, and very early in the game as we wait to get some numbers up on the board as that just closes. And Missouri, as Brett pointed out earlier, does not do any early voting. And a pickup by Hawley would give Republicans a crucial plus in the Senate, where their razor-thin majority currently stands at 51-49. The president has said that if someone gets a cold or sneezes, he loses his majority in the Senate, and he's hoping very much that he can expand that tonight. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, another opportunity for a Republican pickup is in Florida, where Republican Governor Rick Scott is trying to oust Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson. The Fox News Decision Desk does not have enough data yet to project a winner in that race.
Florida, take a look at this one. Too early to say whether Democrat Andrew Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee, will defeat Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis to replace the term-limited GOP Governor Rick Scott, who, as we just mentioned, is running for the Senate.
And speaking of running for the Senate, Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee currently has a lead over Democrat Phil Bredesen, a former governor, to replace retiring GOP Senator Bob Corker, but it's too soon to project a winner in that race.
Also too soon to call, I should say, is New Jersey, where incumbent Democratic Senator Robert Menendez vying with Republican businessman there, Bob Hugin.
And then there's the special election in Mississippi, which actually may not be settled tonight. That's because no fewer than 4 candidates are competing in a jungle primary. If no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote in Mississippi tonight, then the top 2 finishers, and you're likely looking at them there, advance to a runoff election November 27th, 5 days after Thanksgiving. And we should point out there's a scenario where that takes us to the control of the U.S. Senate. We'll talk about that in a minute.
So, and now a race call in Illinois in the gubernatorial contest. Democratic billionaire J.B. Pritzker will unseat Republican Governor Bruce Rauner to become the richest governor, actually, in U.S. history. So a gubernatorial pickup for the Democrats in Illinois is one that we can call.
Unsurprisingly, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, a liberal Democrat, will win a second term in Massachusetts, although she's already considering a presidential run in 2020. Warren defeats Republican Jeff Deal, a state lawmaker, and obviously we saw the DNA stuff earlier in the couple weeks ago.
And in Pennsylvania, Democratic Senator Bob Casey will win a third term by defeating Republican Congressman there, Lou Barletta.
In Connecticut, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy will win a second term by defeating Republican Matthew Corey.
We should also mention that the polls are now closed in 50% of congressional districts across the country, which means that we are going to start getting some early indications in terms of which party will control the House of Representatives. Remember, Democrats need a net gain of 23 seats to pick up that majority.
Let's go back to that governor's race in Florida. And we have a lot of vote total in there. If we can put up that race. Brett, I saw you wanted to weigh in on this. This is Andrew Gillum up 50 to 48. We get a lot of early vote total in Florida. We've dealt with Florida a lot, Brett, over the years.
Yeah, and it's obviously important because it has presidential implications because Florida is such a pivotal state. This is a race where if there's one race, if the Republicans lose, could be laid at the feet of Donald Trump. I think it's this one. The Republicans had a very strong candidate, Adam Putnam, who was in the primary against DeSantis. He's now the state agriculture commissioner, which is a statewide office. He was a member of the House for a number of years and indeed a member of the leadership, considered one of the most promising young politicians in the state. Experienced but young still, very boyish, very attractive, widespread belief in Florida that he would win easily. And Trump threw his support behind DeSantis. DeSantis won the primary. DeSantis is now, and it looks tonight like he might just lose to a very left-wing, although very appealing personality in Gillum from Tallahassee. That race was swung by Donald Trump to DeSantis, who's now behind.
It's possible that Florida splits there, and these races are tight. We don't know yet, but you could have Bill Nelson go down as the incumbent Democrat and Gillum win as the governor in Florida.
Right, and he would be Nelson would go down to the current governor of Florida, whose term limited out. That's Rick Scott, who would now become the new senator from Florida. I think it's right. You guys obviously are more on top of it than we are. Has there been a single call in any of the major Senate races that you know, one of the key races that are going to determine?
No, toss-ups? No.
No, I don't think that either that one side has held on or that one side has flipped one. I mean, here we are at 8 o'clock tonight. Polls closed, as you say, in 50% of the country. And the question of control of the Senate completely up for grabs. Not a single one of those races decided yet.
Again, our probability meter has it at 57% right now. Republicans in control. But when you started the night, it was a lot more confidence that Republicans were definitively going to control. There's a lot of tight races here. As you look at the balance of power, Democrats need 2 to take control, and we're adding up on the screen 43-32. Those white seats, those are the ones we haven't called.
Can I just talk about one of the seats that I think is really interesting is Missouri. And Donald Trump won Missouri. I don't have it right with me, but I think it was by 20 points, exactly. And so an awful lot of people thought, and it's a state that is going more and more red, that Josh Hawley, the attorney general there, very attractive candidate, was going to be able to sweep there. But Claire McCaskill is a tough politician, and she has run as far away from the Democrats, she is a Democrat, as she possibly could.
Oh, she's saying to you, Chris, that she wasn't a crazy Democrat? Or was that what she said?
She said, I'm not one of those crazy Democrats. She also said, when she was interviewed yesterday, I don't really care whether the Democrats hold or the Republicans hold the Senate. You know, it's 51-49. Who cares? And she also is completely, and I think the interview with you, backed Donald Trump on a hard line on immigration. So she's a Democrat. And a lot of people saying, Hawley said, well, yeah, but after the election, she'll be voting along with Chuck Schumer. But in this, during the campaign, at least till today, she's been running a pretty moderate or conservative.
She believed that the caravan is coming and that it needed to be stopped. I mean, she has definitely aligned with the president. She said there should be a wall. She's aligned with him in as many places as she possibly can. But Donald Trump came out the other day saying, you know, she will never vote with me.
Well, for a fact, she's voted 80% of the time with Chuck Schumer, 67% with Elizabeth Warren, 66% with Bernie Sanders. So, I mean,
I think I set you up pretty well there, didn't
you did. That was good. That was good stuff.
That's good stuff.
So joining us
now. Think of Josh Hawley, very attractive young guy, promising candidate. Suppose he were running as a Democrat to seat an incumbent Republican. Do you think Beto O'Rourke would have gotten the level of coverage he has with this other young star coming up? I don't think so. But Hawley's misfortune is he's a Republican, and you don't get adoring coverage.
Yeah, he
when you're a
has not had the
Republican.
same kind of
No,
rock star
indeed.
response
He certainly hasn't.
that Beto O'Rourke has been getting as he's traveled around Texas. So joining us now from Washington, where you guys all usually are, is host of Tucker Carlson Tonight, Tucker Carlson himself. Tucker, good to have you with us tonight. Your observations so far. Hi there.
The Florida race is just amazing. I would add that it wasn't just Republicans who thought that Andrew Gillum would be easy to knock off, but a lot of Democrats I know in Washington were convinced they would never win this seat with him running. I mean, there was a primary on the Democratic side, as you know, as well. Here was a guy who was in some way implicated in an FBI investigation, would not explain that, in fact, called anyone who questioned him racist for asking. One-term mayor of Tallahassee, 126th largest city in America, and running on a platform that was unapologetically left-wing. If he wins Florida, of course it has implications, as you noted, for the presidential race, but it also has much deeper implications for both parties. What does that mean exactly? How did that happen? I agree that DeSantis maybe wasn't the strongest candidate. Perhaps Adam Putnam might have won. But the fact is, if Gillum wins, that raises a lot of questions, and I would say that there are probably two answers, and it's the obvious. It's immigration and the economy. Immigration has changed Florida in a very recognizable way. The California of 30 years ago was solidly Republican, so was Florida. They now have different people living in them, and so they have different electoral results. That has kind of taken place beneath the notice, I would say, of most people paying attention. And the second is the economy, which is weaker in ways that we in Washington don't perceive. So the conventional measures of the economy are GDP and market performance, and both of them are great. But if you look at other indicators slightly beneath the surface, you see that there are a lot of poor people. For example, the single most common living arrangement for young people right now is with their parents. I don't think there's been a time after the Industrial Revolution when that's been true in this country. And that means that questions like health care are much more real than they have been even 3 cycles ago. I mean, Republicans won, what, 63, I think it was 63 seats in the 2010 midterm on the back of Obamacare, opposing Obamacare. Andrew Gillum proposing universal health care, in effect, Medicaid for all, which he has, is written off as most people in Washington as a pipe dream and ludicrous, and I think as a mathematical question, it is ludicrous. There's no way to pay for that. But it definitely resonates with a state that's poorer than it looks. And so I think as Republicans think about how did this happen, how did someone who is not as impressive as you would imagine a governor of a major state would need to be, Andrew Gillum, how did he win, if indeed he does win? I think it's important to think through what's actually happening here. You know, it had nothing to do with Russia or Stormy Daniels. There's real stuff going on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And he also, I think, has built a grassroots campaign from the beginning. He sort of arrived on the scene. A lot of people didn't know who he was. As you say, he's the mayor of, a relatively smaller city in the United States. But his appeal, I think that's also something that I'm kind of watching in terms of the trend of the evening. Charismatic, appealing candidates appear to be doing, fairly well. I mean, we'll see what happens.
Democrats recruited well, in other words.
Absolutely.
But they didn't. But I would argue in this case they didn't. I mean, I don't think if you had assembled a group of 20 Democratic political consultants in D.C. and said, draw your dream candidate, I don't think it would have been Gillum. I think they would have wanted someone who maybe looked like Gillum and had the manner of Gillum, but I don't think they would want someone with the hard left politics of Gillum. They thought he was going to lose. Again, I'm having talked to them. And so I think maybe the hard left economic issues are a little bit more popular than we want to think they are. I think that's ominous. But it doesn't make it any less true. So why is it that Beto O'Rourke, for example, I think will probably lose tonight, but he's coming a lot closer than he should be in the state of Texas? Again, 2 causes. Immigration has changed the demographics in Texas. And 2, some of this populist economic stuff is more popular, again, than we want to think it is.
Tucker, as always, thank you. We're going to make a call
Thank
here.
you.
Yep, the Fox News Decision Desk can now project that the incumbent Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, as expected, will win a 3rd term by defeating Republican Congressman Jim Renacci. This has always been, Sherrod Brown's race to lose, essentially, and he appears to be doing well tonight.
Yeah, he's going to win, and he calls himself a progressive populist, following on what Tucker just talked about, bringing back Chris and Britt. You're looking, Britt, at these states, Florida, Ohio, Missouri, and automatically we start thinking about 2020 and how important they are in that picture.
Exactly, and Florida, of course, has been so pivotal in recent elections that that having control of the state house is thought to be very helpful. I mean, a lot of people felt that if it hadn't been for Jeb Bush in the governor's chair in Florida in 2000, W might not have pulled it off down there. I want to mention one thing. I noticed that our needle on the Senate has begun to point more favorably toward the Republican control. I've been keeping track, as you know I do, of the betting odds.
We do know you do.
Which had the Republicans up in the 80% range. It's now up to 92% Republicans keep the Senate among the people who bet. The House, meanwhile, which was up in the 60s for Democrats getting control of it, that's up to 78%. So people who are betting on this tonight have already pretty well seem to have decided where they think this is going.
We should also point out that Indiana looks like it is breaking a little bit Republican at this moment. It's still too early to make that call, but and we're waiting for Indianapolis, which is a huge area for Joe Donnelly, but it seems like there's a confidence building there. For
it's interesting because we always talked in the buildup, well, Trump has got this big advantage than the Republicans do because Democrats are holding and trying to defend 10 seats in states that Donald Trump won in 2016. What's interesting is that some of them were absolutely on the board, like Indiana, like Missouri, but some of them weren't. One of them was Ohio, a state that Trump won, but Sherrod Brown was always in a sizable lead, and there was never really a serious contest there. Same thing in Pennsylvania, a state that Trump won, but Bob Casey never really had any challenge there as well. So it does, again, Senate races are different than House races. I think people feel more of a connection, more of a history with the senators, but clearly some senators, despite the power of Donald Trump in those states, had an easy time winning re-election.
I mean, 5 of them, Democrats, were running for re-election in states that Trump won by 20 points or more. So that's an uphill battle to begin with.
Yeah. Just going back to Florida for a moment, you wonder when you look at someone like Andrew Gillum, who is such a progressive candidate. And we did the debate with Ron DeSantis and Adam Putnam, as you say, the Florida commissioner. And it was very clear that a lot of the people in Florida and a lot of people in leadership in Florida very much wanted him to be the candidate. But when it is someone like Andrew Gillum, if indeed he ends up pulling this out tonight, it's really close, as we can tell. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. 56% of the vote in, and this is a very tight race at this point. But he may be one of those candidates that has just such unique characteristics that he's pulling in voters who haven't voted in a long time.
Look, I've seen him. I disagree with much of what he says, but I think he's a very attractive guy. I mean, I think he's an appealing guy, and he's disarming in his manner and so forth. And, in a tight situation, that counts for a lot.
All right, many polls are closed, as we mentioned. Ballots still being counted. Plus, will Republicans keep control of the House? That is in question. And it's really going to be decided in probably the next few hours as we count down to the next poll closings. And as we go to break some other races, we have some calls to make. You can see these being made as we head to break. We'll be right back. Races, we've been talking about them, the early ones. There are some tight races, especially Kentucky 6 has turned around now. Incumbent Republican Andy Barr, 3-term incumbent, now up in that race with 84% in over Amy McGrath, a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, one of the first fighter pilots, female fighter pilots. Let's look at the Virginia races. Congressional District 2, Scott Taylor, that's 63% in, slight lead. the 7th Congressional District. This is Dave Bratt, the incumbent. Remember, he was the giant killer who in the primary took down the House Majority Leader, Eric Cantor. He is slightly ahead of the Democrat there, Spanberger. But this could be the first flip of the night. We may be ready for a call, and that is Virginia 10. And that is the Democrat Jennifer Wexton, who's a state senator, up big with 67% over Republican incumbent Barbara Comstock, who is a really good retail campaigner. She was in a district that kind of shifted, as I mentioned before, to a little bit more bluish purple. So she was facing an uphill battle. But those early states, the Kentucky 6 is turning around with 84% in. We're watching those. Let's head upstairs to Bill Hemmer with Martha at the data.
Hello there. We are up here on the terrace now, taking a look at what Bill has on the billboard for us right now.
Yeah, we got a lot to show, too.
Yeah,
Brett, you're just talking about a lot of these races right now. You're talking about the Kentucky race, a few in Virginia. Why don't we just go ahead and dial in on these House races now? This is something that's got a lot of attention right now in Kentucky 6. And, Martha, you've been watching this as well. Look, Andy Barr has a slight lead. If he keeps it close or even wins, it's really good news for Republicans. Heavily Democratic district. She's a first-time candidate, but right now with 85% of the vote in, it looks good for the Republicans. Let's see where the rest of the votes come in there in Kentucky 6. We put a lot of focus on Virginia, and for good reason. Brett, you mentioned it a moment ago. In Virginia 10, it looks like Barbara Comstock will lose her bid for a re-election there in a tough battle with Jennifer Wexton. That's a changing district in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
However, if we pop down here to the southern part of the state, this is good news for Denver Riggleman right now. He's got about a 7-point advantage right now against the Democratic challenger, and you mentioned Virginia 7 as well. Brett, you said he's the giant killer. Right now, about 20% of the vote is still outstanding, but he's hanging on right there.
Dave Bratt unseated Eric Cantor, Tea Party candidate, one of the early people in that wave, and now he's trying to hold on to his own seat, so we'll see where that goes.
I'll tell you a couple of races in Ohio that I find fascinating. I'll take you in right now in Ohio. Remember 3 months ago when the eyes of the political world were focused on Ohio District 12? Martha, this is Columbus. Yeah. It's suburban. It goes out to a rural area. It's a developing part of America that seems to be growing every year. The Democrat, Danny O'Connor, is now beating Troy Balderson by about 6 points. Got a lot of votes to come in right now. Total vote difference is 7,000, but you had about 200,000 3 months ago in August when they had that special election. So we got a ways to go, but right now it looks decent for the Democrat. Here's why I think this race is so important now. See what President Trump did 2 years ago? In this very district, he won it by 12 points. Now, you think about who these voters are, and the census data will tell you these are people who live above the national average by $10,000 a household. They've got about 70% have a college education or better. And look at the race, 85% white. These are white, suburban Americans, well-educated, who have done very well under this economy over the past 2 years. And right now, they appear to be turning against the Republicans.
I mean, that's exactly the kind of area where you're looking at those white, college-educated women, in many cases, that the president perhaps has felt slipping away a little bit. He's talked a lot in recent advertising and appearances in the rallies about how much security matters to women in America, trying to sell them on the issue of the wall, trying to sell them that the caravan is a scary thing. And those are exactly the kind of areas that he was working to hold on to.
And a lot of examples all across the country we're going to watch throughout the night, especially the suburbs of Chicago. Take you down to Florida real quick here. Just this is I-4 corridor. We always think about this during national elections, and yet being in a midterm right now, this is Tampa, it's Orlando, it's Daytona Beach. Right now, the Republicans hanging on with a good percentage of vote on there. Florida 16 down around Sarasota. Again, with 90% of the vote counted, Republicans are hanging on there as well. So you're seeing some bright spots for the GOP. Then you see some spots of concern. And you think about that 23 vote margin in the House right now. And we're going to be going through this as the night goes on, and we'll see whether or not. It raises
a lot of questions about whether there's a blue wave, red wave, or whether there's not really a wave, whether we see a lot of splits in these areas like Ohio and Florida. And we were just talking about how you could potentially see a split between the governor's race and the Senate race in Florida, which leaves you with something looking a lot like Florida, right?
And a hanging chad. Thank you, Martha.
All right, we'll send it back down to you guys.
Remember that. Tallahassee, 40 days and 40 nights. Listen, Florida is really a key battleground, no matter how you look at it. The governor's race in the Sunshine State, Tallahassee mayors, we talked about Democrat Andrew Gillum facing off against Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis. Phil Keating is live at the Gillum headquarters in Tallahassee. Phil, what's the mood down there?
The mood here is jubilant for two reasons. Number one, the deluge, and I mean deluge of rain about 2 hours ago finally passed. There were power outages, there was lightning, there was thunder, and the media had to evacuate the press tent to an indoor building there for a time. But everyone's back out. The rain has stopped. This is the crowd of mostly young people down here below in front of the stage. It's pretty full at this point. They're all enthusiastic. They're hoping this watch party turns into a historic celebratory party for the Democratic Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum. No Democrat has won the governor's race in Florida in 20 years, and if he does win, he'll become the first black governor ever in the state of Florida. His opponents, former three-term Congressman Ron DeSantis, who is an absolute Trump supporter through and through, supports every policy of the president and was endorsed by the president early in the primary campaign, and he's been invited on stage with the president 3 times at big rallies, with the president trying to use his popularity amongst the Florida Republican base to really push DeSantis ahead in this race, most recently Saturday night in Pensacola. Again, the rains have stopped. That's a positive thing. The last 2 gubernatorial races, as well as the last 2 presidential races in the state of Florida, have been decided by just 1 point, 1 percentage point. This is a big swing state. It's a toss-up state, and that is why it is very evenly divided, and the statewide races tend to prove just that much as well. So still early in the race, but we are getting reports down in South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties, huge Democratic strongholds with big percentages of people, and they're showing that there have been waits at the voting polls up to an hour. Brett.
Okay, Phil, thanks. Tell them to change the channel down there. We've got a couple calls to make. On the House side, the Associated Press is calling the race in Florida 27 for Donna Shalala. You may remember she's the former Health and Human Services Secretary for President Clinton, former University of Miami president. This was a tight race against Maria Salazar, a Cuban-American journalist. Shalala, not considered the best campaigner there, and it was really tight throughout. This is a gain for the House Democrats. So now you have +2 for the Democrats as they need to get +23. Also, Florida 6, we are calling for, the Associated Press calling for Mike Waltz, former Special Forces commander. He's a Republican, defeating Nancy Soderberg, the Democrat. The Democrats spent a lot of money on that race. Mike Waltz pulling that out in Florida 6.
Yeah, he was in a tight race. I mean, they had a tough time of it. There's a lot of negative advertising, as we see in a lot of these races going back and forth. Soderberg was a UN representative, alternate representative in the Obama administration, very active in foreign policy in Democratic circles. So that's a pickup, a win for Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz.
Guess what? The night's just starting. We have a lot of race calls that are still pending. Take a look at that. All the white has not been called yet. And we have a lot of races that could be called in just a matter of minutes. You want to keep it here on America's election headquarters. In Arkansas, where polls have just closed, and Fox News can project that incumbent Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson will defeat his Democratic challenger, Jared Henderson. We're also making a call in that Virginia race. Barbara Comstock, the incumbent, will go down to Democrat challenger Jennifer Wexton. This is a gain for the Democrats, so now they are up to +3, I believe, is what they need, 23 net gain to take over control of the House of Representatives.
So let's take a look at the balance of power. As we said, a lot of white cubes still up there as we go through the 435 races that we are watching tonight. A handful of those are toss-up races. As you can see, 2 pickups right now for the Democrats. They need to have 23.
3 with Virginia 10.
3 with Virginia, which has just come in. 3 pickups for the Democrats and Republicans stat at the moment.
Joining us now, House Majority Whip, Louisiana Republican Congressman Steve Scalise. Congressman, thanks for being here. Your thoughts early in the night and whether you can retain control.
Well, we know what's at stake. It's been a battle from the very beginning. I've been in touch with a lot of our members in vulnerable districts, and they're seeing very high turnout in our side. Surely on the Democrat side, we always knew they were going to have high turnout, but to see our side showing up in large numbers too, that tells you that we're battling. And I think in a lot of these swing districts that Pelosi would need to get the majority, we're going to be able to hold on to them. So we've always said it's going to be a late night, a lot of close races. But again, we know where the battlegrounds are, and so far no surprises.
Steve, Martha MacCallum here. You know, when you take a look at some of the fundamentals of what voters are talking about, they seem to be very interested in health care, interested in the economy and immigration, but their numbers are a little bit lower for the president on the issue of immigration, on the issue of health care, and they're very positive on the president when it comes to the economy. How do you see this playing out for you in these House races?
The economy has still been the top issue, and obviously there are other problems with health care. We've seen under Obamacare, you're still seeing double-digit increases in many states in premiums because Obamacare is just not working, and we need to keep working on an answer to Obamacare. It's just a failed law, and there's a much better way to lower premiums and protect people with pre-existing conditions. We've been for that every step of the way. On the economy, look, you can't go anywhere without hearing people say how great the economy's going. Families talking about how they have more wages, more money in their paycheck. And Pelosi wants to reverse the tax cuts, so clearly that's been a big issue and a big talking point in terms of people that are concerned about Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker again.
Andy Barr pull it out in Kentucky 6?
I was just with Andy Friday, and he's been battling. I think he's got a real good chance of winning because he's much more in tune with that district and in line with that district. I mean, his opponent, Amy McGrath, says she wants to be the most liberal, progressive person in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky is not a far-left Pelosi-type state, and hopefully Andy pulls it out in Lexington.
50.3% to 48.5%, 88% in. Congressman, were you upset about the focus in the last days of the campaign, kind of shifting more to immigration, or did you believe that the closing argument should have been more economy?
Well, the economy's been a selling point from the beginning. Immigration popped up because you saw this caravan coming in. And frankly, in a lot of swing districts I've been into, regardless of where they stand on a lot of the complex points in immigration, and I want to see us build the wall. I want border security. But the idea that with millions of people waiting in line to come to this country legally, you have thousands of people just saying we're going to ignore all of those laws and storm right in front of all those other people that are waiting in line to come here. That's not the way to come to America. We're a very generous nation on immigration, and we need strong border security, just like every other country secures their border. So, national security became an important issue. But in the end, the economy still has been something that everybody talks about when there are more job openings than there are people looking for work.
What about the tax reform bill and how it was sold to the American public? Because it feels like a lot of people feel that it didn't work for them, even though the economy seems to have been stimulated by it in so many ways. Has that message been presented in a powerful enough way, and is that reflected at all in what we're seeing tonight?
Well, in most places I went, people actually liked the idea that they had more money in their pockets, and they recognized it. I mean, the bonuses and pay raises that companies, large and small, were giving to their employees are resulting in higher wages. And you just saw the numbers. I mean, numbers keep coming out that wages are going up because of the tax cut bill. And Pelosi said she wants to take it away. She called it crumbs, and then she says she wants to take those tax cuts away. I don't think people are going to want to let that go. I think they want to see us keep building on the economic success that we're having with President Trump.
Congressman Scalise, we appreciate your time. We'll follow up and see how it turns out tonight. We're watching every race.
Thank you, Congressman.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, let's go back, if we can, to that Florida governor's race and put up the screen. This obviously is a key race. Andrew Gillum is the Tallahassee mayor against Ron DeSantis, congressman, and now this is a very, very tight race, although it has shifted in the past hour or so. We have Ron DeSantis with 50 straight up and Andrew Gillum at 48.8. Britt, what are you looking at there?
Well, the question is how much is in, and
93%.
93%.
That's probably 93% of precincts. Right?
Yeah, so Broward County is in, we're told.
Right.
So 93%.
That looks a lot
you've
better
got
for
like
DeSantis than it did a little while ago.
The Panhandle is a late return.
Late return, right.
So it should be coming in.
Panhandle will almost certainly help DeSantis.
Help
Yeah,
DeSantis,
Republican, yeah. So that he might pull that out. It'd be a great relief to Mr. Trump, I would think.
I was going to say, and then you'll take back everything you said about Donald Trump. And
About how Donald Trump shouldn't have supported him.
Chris, I said if he lost, that
would be
later
bad
defeated.
news.
Now, if he wins, maybe we'll consider Trump even more of a genius than I know you already do, Chris.
93% is expected vote percentage, not the precincts in, but a lot of big areas have come in that race. We have our other panel right here, Laura, Juan, Dana, and Guy. Laura, what are you looking at in Florida?
Well, I have to say, if DeSantis, who is a Trump guy, if he manages to pull out this victory with what was thrown at him in the last just 2 weeks, millions of dollars from Act Blue, the big Democrat turnout machine, which has done a great job of registering people to vote for the Democrat Party. They threw in millions. Steyer threw in millions. Other groups threw in millions. This was the most expensive governor's race in the country in Florida. If he squeaks out a victory here, I got to say it's all Donald Trump who won this for him. Ron DeSantis, I think he could have run a better campaign. And, you know, I always take it from my radio audience. I mean, he was an okay guest, but I think he could have taken it up a notch. Gillum is charismatic. He's a storyteller, getting back to stories. I think Britt was exactly right about him. But maybe it was a bridge too far for Floridians in the end. Again, this is a slight victory, though. This is, and it's, you know, he wins, he wins. If he wins, if he wins, it will be a small margin. But nevertheless, a win is a win. And you got to say Donald Trump had to have put him over the edge.
You know, Juan, I just have one thing to, after the Hurricane Michael, there was a lot of talk about whether that would affect the turnout. And after Hurricane Maria, there was a lot of talk about Puerto Ricans coming from Puerto Rico to Florida, 280,000 plus. And they could register to vote right away. They're obviously American citizens. It seems like, just looking at the data from Florida, that was not a huge factor when it came to Republican Democrat. The conventional wisdom was that the Puerto Rican, because of how the hurricane recovery was going to go, would possibly vote Democrat. But they aligned some ways with Republicans.
Well, we don't know for sure yet, but I mean, if you look at that whole I-95 corridor, especially the area around Orlando, you saw a tremendous surge in terms of the Puerto Rican population after the big storms that you mentioned. And there was great, I think, somewhat concern about whether or not that would change the state's politics in a very telling way. I would also say it was compounded by the second hurricane that hit the Panhandle hard, and the question was whether or not that would interfere with people getting out to vote. But what we've seen, and repeatedly, visits by President Trump to stir his base in Florida, to make this a race about Donald Trump. DeSantis is basically a stand-in for Donald Trump in this race. The only question that I think people have here is twofold. One is whether the Latino vote, and oftentimes the Cuban vote, goes Republican. The question is, what about the rest of them, and especially participation? Did they turn out, or did they simply not vote? And the other issue is, of course, you have a black candidate running for governor. How many people said they would vote for him, but actually didn't?
Yeah, and race was a big issue in this race that we watched between Gillum and DeSantis. You know, you remember DeSantis said, you don't want to monkey up this economy, and you and I had a big conversation about that that night. You know, a lot of people saw it as an innocent comment. He's sort of mixing two ideas, mess it up or monkey with it or whatever. And it continued to be an issue that Gillum in the debates in particular really tried to hit him hard with.
Well, he said, in fact, it's not that I'm calling him racist, it's that racists think he's racist. But what you saw even in the closing days of this race was that you had people using racially charged language. And the question is, how does race impact this contest? Because all the numbers had seemed to indicate that Gillum was in the lead. And yet we're looking right now, and it looks too close to call.
They're getting ready, we're told, for possible recounts down there. 86,000 separate the two in the race.
In Florida, a recount?
Imagine that. Imagine that. Hanging chads, here we come.
Betting odds have shifted dramatically for DeSantis in just the recent while. Betting odds now have it almost 2-to-1 almost for DeSantis. So 62-34 is a
I expect you to have a visor.
And maybe a big cigar.
Yeah, and garters on my sleeve.
Exactly.
Right.
And a bulldog.
Suspenders, right?
There you go. We've got to take a break.
Sunglasses.
As we count down to the next poll closings at the top of the hour.
What role, if any, did the economy play in voters' decisions? It appears that it plays a big role, but people seem to think it cuts both ways. Maria Bartiromo joins us on that, coming up next. Got a lot more polls coming in this evening. As we wait for more to close, we have some new numbers from our Fox News voter analysis. Here's what it's telling us about the top issues with voters. Check out this map. The darkest purple identifies states with the highest percentage of voters saying that the top issue facing the country is the economy and jobs. Wyoming has the most choosing the economy at 29%. Minnesota has the fewest, saying the economy is the most important issue overall. 19% say that the economy is the top issue facing the country. Joining us now is Maria Bartiromo, anchor of Mornings with Maria on Fox Business Network and Sunday Morning Features here on the Fox News Channel. Maria, it's really interesting to discuss this whole issue of how much the economy and the growth that we've seen is compelling voters one way or the other tonight.
I think you're right, and I think that is what is compelling voters. We've had this debate over the last 6 weeks, 3 months about health care versus the economy. At the end of the day, it is, am I feeling better today than I was 2 years ago? And that really is what we're seeing play out tonight. You look at something like Kentucky, where manufacturing is the largest generator of economic activity there, and we've seen manufacturing jobs come back in the last 2 years. An unemployment rate on a national level at record lows, 3.7%, and earnings, corporate sector earnings, up 22% quarter after quarter. One of the most important economic policies from the Republicans and the Trump administration has been the rolling back of regulations. When you look at what could happen if the Dems take control of Congress and Maxine Waters running financial services, Gerald Nadler running judiciary, you see a push away from that, away from rolling back regulations and perhaps putting more of the clamps on business, and that would certainly reverse what we've seen in the last 2 years.
I want to interrupt you for a second. Associated Press calling Kentucky 6 for incumbent Andy Barr, so he will become a fourth-term incumbent. We are putting the check mark next to Andy Barr. That is a huge, huge development in the early races. Again, as we were talking early on, this was a bellwether, and Amy McGrath ran a great race, but she will go down to Andy Barr, who pulls this out in Kentucky, which is a huge deal. And I want to update the other toss-up states that we're looking at with Claire McCaskill in Missouri. That's early. We are looking, though, very closely at Indiana, 49% in. And you see Mike Braun starting to separate there. 53.8% to Joe Donnelly's 42%. We're saying it's too close to call, but Republicans there in Indiana are feeling confident about Mike Braun. He's a businessman, Maria. He ran essentially saying we need more people like President Trump to talk business to Washington.
That's right. And that is why that rolling back of regulations really resonates there, as well as the fact that there's smaller government and lower taxes. Look, in the 10 years prior to the Trump administration, businesses were sitting on their cash. They weren't sure what regulation was coming around the pike. I mean, they didn't know if they were going to face higher fees, higher needs for lawyers, for compliance officers because of the regulatory environment. That changed, and it has changed in the last 2 years. That's why you're seeing capital spending increases up on the part of business. Capital expenditures are up. These are some of the metrics that you want to look at in terms of where the business community stands. In Kentucky, you were talking about one of the worst economies in the entire country, and now you've seen manufacturing growth. Trade, obviously a big issue, particularly with the president's stance on tariffs. We'll see how that plays out in Kentucky, but I think this is a vote from the people on economic policies that they want to see continue.
We know that Braun has really been driving up the rural vote in Indiana, and they're still waiting for some of the Indianapolis vote to come in, which obviously would be a better area for Joe Donnelly. But we watch these candidates who have been paying attention to the areas that the president paid attention to in Pennsylvania, in Indiana, in Wisconsin, some of which we're obviously still waiting to come in for. But he paid attention to them, and these candidates are also driving up the vote in those areas.
Absolutely. And President Trump going out 3 rallies yesterday, 2 the day before, 2 the day before that. He is working hard because he knows what's at stake for his own administration, his own, in the next 2 years. You're either going to see a further of his economic policies or investigation after investigation after investigation.
Maria, thank you. I remember 2 years ago, you were at that desk over there. It was 3 in the morning. President Trump had been declared the president, and the market futures went down 800 points. And you said, that seems like a buy to me because of regulations, taxes. If people had listened to you, they could be a lot richer.
A lot of them did, and they made a lot of money, I think.
No, I saw just the economic policies that was driving my, my thinking that night. And when you talk about rolling back regulations, lower taxes, small government, that will drive business. That will encourage business to create jobs. That's why I said to you, I guess, the next morning, you got to buy this with both hands.
Yeah, but Paul Krugman said the market was going to completely collapse, that it would fall apart and cease to exist.
And I said not.
No.
Thank you.
You were right, as usual, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stick around.
Maria. Chris Stirewalt is our Fox News politics editor. We've gathered him out of the decision desk area and pulled him out. Chris, we want to talk Florida.
Okay.
We want to talk Florida first, and that is the governor's race down there that has Ron DeSantis up. It looks like Scott is performing better, too, than even President Trump did in Miami-Dade County.
Well, there is that, and he ought to be expected to, just based on the fact that he was governor and the way that the midterm electorate looks. But there is still a lot of football to be played down there. We're watching it very closely. We're babysitting. It's obviously one of the most important discussions we're having, but it's just too soon for us to say. These are both very close races, and they're both close races in places where Democrats felt like they had an advantage. So that's an area of concern for them. They were not, I wouldn't say counting on Nelson holding on for sure, but they had strong feelings about it. They felt like it was going to be okay. And the very fact that we're going to have to worry this, we're going to be talking about Florida long after my normal bedtime, I'm sure.
59,000 separating Scott and Nelson, 93% in. Where's the rest of the 7%?
Well, I've been waiting to talk to you for a minute, so I don't feel entirely comfortable saying exactly where the vote is coming in. But 7% out of that many millions of votes is a lot of votes.
Panhandle, perhaps, is still outlying. Usually that's a later part to come in Florida. But, Chris, when you look at the closeness of this race at this point, and you talk about Rick Scott, who has been trying to convince people there that as governor, he's always watched out for them in the hurricanes. The president has tweeted saying, Rick Scott calls me all the time about what's going on in Florida and how I can help the people there. He says, Bill Nelson's never called me once. These are both people, in both of these 2 different races that Floridians are extremely familiar with.
They are. And also, we know that from Rick Scott's prior performance in his 2 gubernatorial runs, he was slightly trailing going into the end in the polls and then eked past his competitors both times. Landslide Scott has won by 1%, basically 1% both times in his statewide runs. So this is familiar territory for him. If he pulls off a narrow win, he would be certainly conforming to prior performance.
All right, before we lock you back in that room, talk to me about Indiana. Are we close on Indiana? I mean, you've got, we say too close to call, 50% in, but Mike Braun seems to be performing pretty well.
Well, Mike Braun has done well in the places he needed to do well. Now we're going to find out how well Joe Donnelly does in the places he needs to do well. Lake County, the northeastern or the northwestern part of the state, matters a great deal for Democrats. That is going to be huge. That is going to be a pivotal question, and either Joe Donnelly is about to get a lot better off or a lot worse off, and we're going to know a great deal in the minutes and probably the hours to come.
All right, so we have this camera looking at the decision desk. So if you have anything, just go like this.
I will throw up a smoke signal, Brett.
Yeah. I love that camera too.
There it is.
Let's take it. There it is.
There it is. Is anybody eating anything bad in
I think it looks like, people have just been arrested and they're being interrogated.
They really do.
Dana Perino brought us enough candy that we will be jacked up on bit of honey until the 2020 election.
All right, Chris, we'll check in a bit. Thank you.
You bet.
So we are just moments away from the 9 o'clock Eastern calls here on the East Coast, plus a whole nother wave of poll closings about to come in.
14 states at the top of the hour, including places like Arizona with that tight Senate race. Oh, yeah, Texas. Remember that race?
Can't wait to see that.
Our live coverage.